Hello?
Hello.
Hi.
What's going on?
Nothing much.
Well, anyways, this is the Crew 2 Podcast, or TC2 Podcast for short. Dead Game Takes episode 30. And, I'm Feather. If you don't know me, you shouldn't. I've done nothing for like the past year now. Only until recently, doing the fucking rally raid runs. Probably know me from that. Otherwise, I also have Deco here. Deco, you probably know Deco from the testing sheet. If you don't know him from that,
testing cars on the Dead Game.
yeah, if you don't know him keeping that alive still for whatever reason, then you probably know him from, I don't know, Boat Jesus from way back when. And then we have Jot.
You probably know me from back in the day. I used to play Air Race a lot, and you might know me from my New York streams. And otherwise, I am a moderator in TCC, and yeah, that's all. I used to play competitively 2 years ago.
Then we have GeForce. You might know him from the community spotlight when the game
Oh
first rose.
god, no, not again. No.
He's a
Not
superstar
again.
here.
Oh no.
Or you might also know him from Bro GeForce. You got a tune?
That's Bone Star.
Yep, and that's it.
Feather, tell us, what is the stream about?
So on this stream, we're talking about some rants, some stuff that's been happening, why no one else is playing anymore. The only people left playing are just randos that we just have no idea where they came from. And some stuff about the current state of the game. Probably where the game's going. How even like maybe just the general feel of where the game industry is going. Particularly for racing games. It felt like it's kind of fallen off and everyone's kind of just hopping to next game. And then maybe it's the Motorfest announcement. After that, some tinfoil hat theories. But we can also throw that into like the gaming industry part.
All right.
I want to immediately drop in and say that the reason we don't know these new people is because we don't really play the game anymore.
Yeah. Yeah, it's probably one of the biggest reasons is like there's just like animosity between I feel like personally there's like some animosity between the newer gen community and the old gen community that I used to play. Mainly because the old gen community simply just doesn't play anymore. So yeah, obviously we don't know each other that well. And yeah.
Maybe we should go into why we don't play anymore.
Indeed. Well, I feel like for most of us, the game has kind of just like dropped off in the sense that over the course of the game, the updates and themes of the updates that have been coming out just haven't really been all that impressive nor appealing content-wise. And content aside, most of the changes they have been brought to the game were generally considered negative, and we felt like they mostly had a negative impact on the game, like most noticeable changes being stuff like handling changes that no one asked for or made the handling in many ways unintuitive or worse, introduced biases based on input device or mechanics like air nos that kind of like just made things weird and just broken on many things, and just the stuff that was never really designed to work with the game, like from the get-go, or stuff that the game was just never quite meant for but was sort of shoehorned in anyway. And yeah, and then there's the lack of support of things that like the player base did used to play, the dedicated player base stuff as PvP, never really being expanded upon, never really worked upon, with the summit being the main thing. At least that's from my point of view. That's what I can say. Probably just made us stop playing the game after a while. It's probably around where the police style update, Interceptor update came out. The chase. I think that's where most of us started dropping the game. Motor Pass.
I feel like it started earlier though. It started with Inner Drive with the handling update, right? That's where most of us, I feel like, I don't know.
I feel like that's where Kyle, I remember him dropping the game around Inner Drive because he
straight up quit.
He just couldn't drive, which is absolutely understandable. And I guess others, like, I was still sort of sniffing on hopium and copium, like trying to just get used to it. But yeah, that's probably where some of us like just started considering the game a downgrade. I mean, we already started considering the game a downgrade, but like we were still sort of playing in the sense that there was like new handling and there was new meta, new everything is new. Like all the cars handle differently, so like trying out what is what and what works in PvP. I feel like there was still some sort of resurgence and like Hiron was still doing regular streams, and I think PvP event was still a thing
Yeah.
for a while.
Yeah, they're still doing that.
Yeah, so they were still doing that. So I feel like thanks to Hiron doing regular PvP streams, so like a lot of us would join in and come in and play with him, and PvP event going on every Saturday sort of had to help the game alive. And I feel like even though the inner drive handling was a downgrade, the fact that it like sort of like reset the meta and everything, like all cars were differently balanced, which made for more interesting like races in PvP at least. Because like the car balance at least in PvP was nicer. So I feel like that was initially a bit more of a freshener. But yeah, you already were starting to sort of have like a very jaded view of the game. Most of us, thanks to the handling. And I feel like Blazing Shots initially started like that initial part, where we had that split of handling models where we had the SLS and then the other old handling. SLS Expo and then it's the old handling, and Hypercar had its own issues with like the specific hypercars. And honestly, it's just been downhill because the game never truly recovered, if you think about it. Ever since Hot Shots, where they introduced the concept of the beta handling model with the slower steering, the game has never truly recovered. It has always been just handling model upon handling model, and there's still to this day disciplines that just they have never been unified, period.
Yeah, every car they introduced had the updated model, but they never went back for the old ones. And now they're slowly realizing that, hey, we need to update all this old stuff because it's just very unusual, especially for new players. Like you pick a car and you think, you expect a certain thing from a vehicle, and it doesn't feel the way you think it will, just because it's a different handling model from a time that you weren't even playing the game.
Yeah, if for a newer player, especially, I can just imagine how confusing it is. Like I've had many times on Discord, new players coming in and like saying this car sucks. Why is it so bad? Because like they just started playing the game after the whole handling shenanigans, right? So they like probably tried something like the Gallardo, which was like touring car, let's say, which was new handling. And then they drove something like a Summit car, Summit restriction car, like an old handling car, like a Porsche GT3 Cup. And all of a sudden they're like, man, this is dog shit. What the fuck? But like they just didn't know that it was just a different handling model, and that's why the car is the way it is. And I feel like that probably warped new player perception a lot. And for us, like people who were playing a lot, at least from me, it just made me not like really enjoy the game as much, because like I just couldn't really get into like the whole detail of one handling model and learning it, because I had to sort of like have two different handling models I needed to know, especially during the Blazing Shots era when like the majority of the cars were still old handling, so you kind of still needed to know old handling, so you could never really get into it. And then there was the whole the fact that you can't even push the handling, you can't even get the nitty gritty down with the handling, because you're limited all the time by steering, input delay, and body roll. And I feel like that sort of just started just making us all jaded, at least in my eyes.
I started really getting jaded one day when during the when they're updating, when they started putting in the time attack events. That's where I started. I was like fuck, I don't really want to play anymore. That's especially when
which event?
The time attack events, when they had the promotional
tour.
the speed tour events. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
When they really started pushing for the competition, I'm like, that's really silly. Like, what competition? If you're going to ghost the event, everyone's going to slipstream it. There's going to be no real competition except for between crews, but you're not denoting whether or not someone is driven in a crew or not. And it's just like people flexing, oh, I beat your time. I'm like, yes, but you did it in a crew. Okay. I'm driving solo. I just kind of fell off just from playing the game and other real life events that happen in my life.
That's a good point you brought up, though, because like a lot of people, if you look at the general consensus of the public, say, "Oh, Speed Tour was a fantastic update, great update," but like, if one actually considers the points you just brought up, it really wasn't that great because it had nothing to do with competition, as you said. It was purely slipstream bias. Every track was slipstream bias. If you didn't have a crew, there was no competition. If you were a competitive player, like you wanted to set solo times, literally older tracks, the OG tracks were literally better. Some of like the not so really slippable tracks. But if you were if you wanted to do actual, any of the speed tour events competitively, there was nothing you could do.
All
It
the
was
Speed
just
Tour was just new event.
new event with slipstream.
I mean, even older tracks, like the tracks that you consider solo events, just because other people get in the way of your line, you could still just load in with another crew member and have them wait on the street and tow you through.
Yeah,
Because slipstream is just that powerful that you could just gain a second off of just one area being slipstream.
for sure.
The same thing for like just recently for me, the was it Salem Woods, that was destroyed by slipstream, like as like more people just who is it, Lafayette and I forget their names already.
Necrex?
Yeah, Nectrix. They started running the thing. I ended up playing with them a couple of times to slipstream that track, just because we all had it, down on muscle memory at that time. And that track was considered a solo track for the longest time. Now all of a sudden there's like a second ahead on the solo time.
Yeah,
The whole competition aspect was extremely silly to me.
yeah, it always was.
I think it's a perfect like point for me to say like what really done did it in terms of like regularly playing the game for me. Like stuff like those seasonal updates being like a tiny bit up, like yay, new events like Speed Tour, everyone was excited because of the new events. The problem is that even like for that small up, you always come back to like the game's issues with that Speed Tour really in exaggerated form, as almost everything was just pure slap. And then for that small up, you have to remember how big of a down comes right after it with the contractor.
Oh,
And then after the contractor, after suffering for 4 months of that, you get American Legends, I believe, was it?
Wasn't it a stunt update or something? Like some stunt themed update, or was that before?
Stunt theme was before the
second
Speed
one.
Tour.
Uh,
And
after
I
Chase.
guess it was considered still more quality than the chase and giving people more hope in the potential being realized sometimes in the game, because the prop work and stuff on that event, like the base layer of that event was actually really nice. Like
the American Legends, the whole story thing,
Yeah.
right? I remember.
that was the 5th one, and that's like the one which really killed it for me. And then like they almost justified it with the Forsberg stuff, but then the second episode started so horribly wrong with those like already not interesting ice events being broken. That's where, for me, the deal was really sealed that this game is never going to have like a proper comeback. Like all those updates will just continue the cycle of a tiny bit of an up, but then you realize that it's still just the same game with the same flaws that never get fixed. And you know that the episode 2 usually is just more of the same, if not worse. And after that, a season will come which will make things worse yet again. And of course, the handling situation touched upon earlier, when the question of when they are going to unify this game, when they are going to get it out of basically live beta. It was a question for 4 years now, and it's still a question, with the answer probably being never. So that's what really, I guess it really settled me into that category of just sometimes playing the car summit, testing out the new cars for not for to continue, supplying the community with the tunes and the information on the meta, which I do, and yeah, that's it. The whole PvP scene died because of all the problems before. Like for PvP to be alive, there needs to be something to bring people in the first place. Like when everyone was really hype about the summit, like people would go into PvP after playing the summit very often. There would be streams when people would start with the summit and then continue with the PvP for a little bit to not cut it short and stuff like that. It's all gone now.
So
And yeah, it's sort of like staying like that for a year now. Yeah, go on, fair.
So for PvP, for me, I actually played it recently, and I didn't have very much fun. I was just kind of just like playing it just to fuck around and see what was going on. I played it. I can't drive any other car except for what's considered meta now. Every other, the top of the line cars are just way too fast now compared to what came out during Interdrive.
Yeah, they killed the little bit which actually helped the game like get revitalized for a year or so.
Yeah, like
but they did.
I think on Deco Sheet, like what's considered like good was it green now? I think is the green section, right, Deco?
It's not even going to be good anymore for like most of the players. Like I considered it good for myself because like those old meta cars, they are still ridiculously quick, but yeah, in the eye of the average player, they are just nothing because
the top
you
cars
pretty
are
much
just
need to maximize them to keep up with the top cars.
Yeah, top cars are just way too insanely fast. The power creep
Yep.
is actually kind of nuts.
And then you look down, there are like 10 seconds of even slower cars. Like the amount of content which was made irrelevant is insane.
I remember like back in back during Interdrive when PvP was sort of like we're still getting adapted to the new handling, and like the time where we sort of started getting used to the new handling and we started going faster and faster. Like there were cars that were considered like to be like mid, like solid mid, but like you could use them in PvP and they were like still sort of a nice experience. Like for example, like the BMW M8, like it wasn't anywhere close to top tier, but like in PvP it was still usable because it was easy to drive and chill. But like now, if you think about it, those types of cars that were considered to be at least usable on any track, you wouldn't even keep up with them, with the top tier cars, right? Something like that Eclipse that goes like 470 or whatever the hell.
I'm trying to look up the numbers.
Or the Countach, they would just like there would be nothing. I remember like even back then, like the Panther, which was considered to be insane in PvP with clutch, they would break slipstream on against a lot of cars. That was already insane, but then like you have these cars, these new generation of power creep cars, and it's just another level. It's just unreal.
I have some stats for you on that topic now. Like I just looked up what was the meta like not during Interdrive, but right after was the update titled Summer in Hollywood. Like when that came out, there was a period of Carrera 4S leading the charge. And it was already like, it won by a little bit on the previous old cars. But basically, right now, if you look at top of it, there are 15 cars faster than it within like 3 seconds. Like the meta is 3 seconds quicker.
Yeah.
And you would think, okay, like there are still like 15, 16 cars above to use. But like if you look down, like what cars were in the position of the Carrera 4S previously, like the cars 3 seconds down, the amount of cars 3 seconds down from that Carrera was over 100. We went from over 100 of cars being within 3 seconds of meta to 15.
Yeah, that's insane.
That's just a giant
insane.
no on using most of the
that
cars
is
in the class.
that just goes to show the massive levels of power creep, and I feel like that's what like at least during Interdrive for me made PvP interesting is like we were like, well, this handling is shit. At least so I was that way. Like I was like, I hate this handling, but at least it's somewhat serviceable, like for casual driving. And there's so many cars I can use now. Cars that I would Like before in old handling, if a really, really good driver picked a Hurricane and you picked something like that was relatively low power, you were kind of dead in the water. There's
Top
nothing much you could
59
do.
now. Top
There's
59.
nothing. There's nothing much you could do. But I mean, like the old handling Hurricane on old handling, But like on inner drive, an inner drive came along. I was like, no, I can even pick sort of a mid car, and it can be somewhat of a battle. It's nice. But now it's like that one thing that was like sort of still interesting in PvP. I feel like is gone now because the meta cars, as Feather and Deco pointed out, are so power creep to the max that it's not even funny anymore.
The stuff which was like considered like almost high tier, very usable. In fact, like very fast for many lobbies. Like, for example, the Mercedes-Benz AMG GT. Like that stuff was like well into the top 50, but now it's like 88. It's just completely unusable. Cars like which were considered like hyper strong, like handling cars, like 911 Turbo 3.6 from the season pass. That isn't even in the top 50 anymore. It's
My Camaro.
51st. Yeah, Camaro is just like it's down like towards the 100 because it just doesn't have the power. Like it has great handling, but the amount of cars which now match it in handling, but also have like 2 times the power is insane.
Yeah.
Diablo is almost fallen off top 50. Like the Diablo when that came out, again, it was like the car's sometimes too fast for most lobbies,
Yeah.
especially if you have clutch. Like you would just cap people too hard.
I
But now
remember
it's
that.
48th.
I remember that Diablo was considered to be like, back when it came out, it was insane. It was considered to be, top tier in PvP. Like, whenever somebody would pick Diablo, they're like, this guy's going all out,
Yeah.
But
You would
now,
pick it
like,
if you would
yeah,
want to keep up with the fastest cars, because
exactly.
it's like only slipstream distance away from the top car at the time.
Yeah. Because now it's like Diablo wouldn't be anywhere near. And I feel like part of the reason is like, yes, we always our meta cars. The meta cars in TC2 were always just broken, right? To an extent. There was no meta car anywhere in TC2 in like my experience that didn't have every strength available. But like the meta cars and during inner drive, like the guy that was only a leaderboard meta car. Let's be real. In PvP, was fairly useless. The meta cars in PvP, like they sort of still had their were still sort of within reasonable levels of power creep. For example, like cars, you had cars like the Panther, which were ridiculous on power and good on grip too, but like they required you to have some sort of skill because like the Panther wasn't just an easy to drive car necessarily for many players.
On hairpins, you would start spinning the wheels, kind of kick out the back a little bit. You still have to
Exactly.
control a bit.
Exactly. So like you had the difficulty, but then if you mastered it on the straights with that insane NOS power, even in PvP and engine power, you got rewarded by it. But now the new meta cars like the 911 GT2 and the Countach, I haven't driven the Countach, but like because I didn't play the game, but like from what I heard, it's pretty nuts. But like like the last meta car I drove was the 911 GT2, and I was just shocked because like it had all the strength of the Panther with none of the downsides. It had massive amounts of grip, massive amounts of clutch power, everything. It's just so like whereas before it was like, oh shit, he picked a Rift or he picked a Panther. Okay, he's gonna be fast, but there's still some sort of skill to be had. Now it's like it's gone. Like the
Definitely
911.
feel like some of the older meta cars at least had downsides. Like you said, the Gallardo, it was the summit, like the leaderboard king, but like in terms of handling and in terms of like just raw engine power, it was average. It wasn't even that great. It just had good NOS power and good grip. It was fairly difficult to extract the most out of it for like high tier leaderboards, but easy to extract a lot out of.
Yeah. I feel like
then you had like the PvP cars, like the Panther and the Rift and the Wasp. Like those were cars that did not necessarily have slipstream top speed. They didn't really. They weren't as easy to drive. They had some downsides to them, but when you compare that to especially the Countach, that thing has grip for days. It has NOS power for days. It has good enough engine power to keep up with all the high engine power cars. It's just
like, there are no
downsides anymore.
Exactly. Like I remember still, during the rain, it was then during LA East. I remember driving with Urza in the Griffith, and I don't know what car I was in. Like I think it was some very easy to drive car that was still strong. And the Griffith had tons of power, ridiculous. The Peppermint edition I'm talking about.
Yeah.
The
Actually, one of
tons,
the highest power
ridiculous,
versions
yeah,
and stuff.
ridiculous levels of power. So on the straights he would gap me, but like I noticed even Urza would, because it was rain, he was visibly struggling in the low speed corners, and that's where I would gain him. But like something like that would never happen with the new cars like the Countach or the 911 GT2. They just have so much grip and so much power. They have nothing. So like there's just on PvP you're just reduced to like such a narrow amount of cars. It's really not usable anymore. And that takes the only good thing that what PvP had in that game away, in my eyes. Even though we don't even play the game anymore, but like that, if I were to play, I wouldn't even play PvP that much anymore because of that. Because it's like, well, if I want to keep up realistically, this is all I got. Because they're yeah.
There's a question I want to pose though. That for like the top 5 cars they have now, like would you consider them fun to drive? Compared to like the top 5 cars from like a year ago being fun to drive.
I
I feel like
can't
they're
believe
easier, which makes it less frustrating to drive them fast.
probably yeah, because like the handling model is already so frustrating, right? So like anything that's easier to drive is just like thank fuck, it's like a relief. But if I'm honest, like I haven't driven the Countach, but I've driven the 911 GT2, and honestly, like I didn't really consider it all that exciting because like there was no downside, there was nothing you had to like sort of like understand and like get understand with the car and like come to grips with, and then like get rewarded that the fact that you understood and respected the car's specific weakness and then utilized the strengths to for its potential. For example, like the Rift, for example, on American cars, the Gallardo is faster, but the Rift was able to put out a very respectable time if you knew how to extract the car's cornering and work the car to its strengths. It's like those sort of like top tier cars that multiplayer I found very rewarding to drive. But like when something is just just has everything, I feel like I don't know. I feel like that's where the meta sort of becomes
It's all gone
downward.
now.
Downwards. It's this.
Countach,
Go on.
if you had to compare, like since you tried the 911 GT, Countach is just the more brain dead version of that. Like it butter rolls way less. It has more top speed for you. It has all-wheel drive for some reason, so it's even easier for you to put down the power and stuff. And like
It's hard for me. Go on.
the only downside to that car, like if you take it just a little bit easier on the corners, like that downside is gone. The downside is bumps, which only matters when you really like max it to, like either to get like the clean testing run, which I do, or like to go even harder, like for world records and stuff. For general PvP driving, you just take it, I don't know, like a couple kmh slower in the corner, and the downside is gone. There's just nothing. It's absolutely like the most brain dead meta car yet. Like they beat it on all the fronts from the previous cars.
That's
They
pretty crazy.
combined everything
It's
together
hard
in
for
one
me
car.
to imagine something that's like easier to drive than the 911 GT2 because relative to stuff like the Rift, the Peppermint, the Panther, the 911 GT2 already felt like easy mode. So I can only imagine.
Well, you just don't get punished even like if you have I used to run like more aero setups on 911 GT. You will get a little bit punished over the butterroll moments, like the one which we just saw in the video, the car
Yeah.
just lifting
Yeah,
and you having to
yeah.
catch it. Like you would get punished, and especially in a lower grip situation like the snow, like you would still get punished a little bit. What would happen to the Countach in that situation? Well, it's just so flat to the ground and it rolls so little that it's not going to matter. Plus, all-wheel drive. Plus, it turns a ridiculous amount even with reduced aero. So, like, you get more stability than stock aero, and yeah, it's actually optimal in like the more brain dead configuration.
It's highly unfortunate. Yeah. Well, it's funny because like from a non-PvP point of view, it's actually that's something similar has happened in Hypercar. I'm sure you all know what I'm talking about, the 300 plus. Because like there's another reason I just like because I was thinking about like like doing New York streams a bit again. Like just whenever I didn't have enough games to play. There was a period where like I was busy with sort of GTA, but then GTA sort of dropped off, and I was like, I might do some New York streams again. But like I realized that like it just got boring because before there was actually a good amount of meta variation in New York, especially when the long range came around. It like gave you more options. So in New York, you had the four Devos, which would think, okay, well, that's just a Devo. But like, if you were somebody who like played a good bit of New York like me, there was actually a good bit of difference in the personality of each Devo, and like, so it actually provided for some nice variety when you got fed up with one of them, you could just switch to the other, and like it would be a breath of fresh air on each day, each of their different strengths. Then you
Wait,
had the LVN,
so
which was
so
go on.
Devos would be like stronger in certain sections of the track.
Yeah, so like for example, the for me the stock Devo always felt the most powerful power wise.
like
Like it felt
it was like the baseline. It was like what you compared all the other ones to, right?
it felt very powerful in the straights, but like it felt it also had the least cornering ability with the arrow balance that you had. And the Magma sort of felt like the Magma to me felt very sticky, but it felt it was rolly. I felt it was quite rolly because it was stickier. The tire, like it would more grip. So there were some corners where I found the Magma to be quite awkward because it would roll more compared to the regular Devo. But it had its specific advantages over specific corners, especially like because of the way the Magma suspension worked. It was stupidly fast on some cuts. Like cuts were like there were certain bumps which the Devo would absorb, and that because it absorbed them, it actually got slower because it would stay on the ground. The Magma would bump up several times, and as a result, because you're holding down NOS, it would just gain like 100 kilometers per hour because you were in the air more than like half a second more than the Devo.
And it doesn't even outside the cuts. Like the Hollywood uphill second corner where you go to the bridge before the grass skip, like it even does that weird up and down bumping, like in the middle of just nowhere, almost a flat road. Like I could sometimes hear the suspension going up and down on that car when simply maxing out a corner, like without even the bumps.
Yeah,
That's
and
why
then
it was ridiculously strong on.
and then you had the Emerald, which Emerald, it's funny because it was always hated initially. Everybody hated the Emerald from what I remember, but it was actually very strong. It was just as strong as the other Devos. There wasn't like pace-wise, there was no discernible difference. It just depended on personal preference. For me, Emerald seemed to always have a lot of grass stability, which matters a lot for cuts. Like, especially let's say you're doing like hours and hours of New York tryharding, you're drained, right? So like you want something like Emerald was a nice breath of fresh air because you could switch to something more consistent isn't as punishing.
Yeah, it is softer. And
Yeah,
it glides
the
over
softer,
everything easier.
the softer suspension of the Emerald really like made it unique. And then you had the LVN, which was the weakest in my experience on cuts, but it was the strongest on the road. It had the best cornering. It had very strong turning, even on -1 arrow. It felt like basically stock arrow, and it was the strongest on the road. And like that was definitely one of my favorite cars to drive because like the way it felt. It was very rolly, but it was weirdly stable because it could run -1 arrow and still get the turn in. But it was the weakest on cuts, but it was also like the strongest on the road. So you had this meta variation among the like just among the Devos. I still count the LVN as the Devo because it is, like I just among the Devos, and we haven't even gotten to the fact that you had the other options. So like there was other options if you wanted to. If you're like I'm bored of the Devo style. Like the 7 gears, the same sort of driving. Similar driving style at least. I'm bored of them. I want to get something else. You had the option of picking the Regera. The Regera was a very underrated meta car in New York. It was pretty much top tier pace.
It's still viable nowadays.
No.
Not with a 300.
Not with a 300. It's useless. Even versus the LVN, it was a struggle. Like the Regera would gain massively on the first section of New York, but the moment you start getting to after the Salt Lake section where the highway comes, like the LVN would gain so much. Even after the initial section, you guys know the uphill highway that goes towards Salt Lake, like the long uphill highway. Yeah. That's where the Regera would obviously lose a lot. Like whenever there was a highway, basically, like the Regera, that was the Regera's biggest issue. The Regera's main strength was single gear, so cuts were insane with it, right? That's why it's used for off-road escapes. And you could get some scary speeds on cuts. But it was also like the most frustrating car to drive out of all of the meta cars.
It's like a very dark horse pick where nobody really knew what to expect from it.
Yeah.
It's just such a difficult car to extract the most out of.
Yeah, the way I found it is like when I tried it and I got a really good run. This was like back, with the old cut and with old cars. So obviously now the run would be pretty slow. But I got a 2330 with a Regera, and I showed it to Root, and everybody was like, Root was like, "What the fuck? How is this possible?" And it was like, and yeah, like I told him like this car is insane. It's really good, and and the reason why I tried it is because IMAX told me to try it out because he said it might be like top tier pace, and sure enough, it was. It was very fast. So you had the Regera, which was like completely different, right? The Regera loses pace everywhere. It loses pace in the corners because it has horrendous body roll. It loses pace on the straights because the NOS like just doesn't help its top end as much, although the power is good. But the moment, like the thing with the Regera is you spend like one section like losing time to the LVN. One cut comes, you gain all of that time back, which was just it was so funny to watch. Like for example, like the up to the first section of New York, like where the roundabout is, roundabout where the roundabout is, where you pass through the trees. You're like 4, 5, 6 seconds down to the LVN. After that, there comes one cut where you skip like a section. You do that one cut, you're instantly back on pace with the LVN. So it was like very like niche and unique, sort of like a rally raid car, like that would just like it had its own unique personality, which made it fun. And then you had that option. So you had like 5, 6 different options, and then you had the long range that came along. That was also a completely breath of fresh air. Like I did some testing, and I had streams where I got 2340s, 2350s, like took regularly, because the long range has insane NOS, insane handling, and that was the car's biggest potential. It's just handling beast. So like if you could preserve your momentum and you didn't fuck up too many times, that long range was basically top tier as well. So you had all these several options. So like New York was always fun because what I would do on streams is I would regularly switch and I would talk about the differences of the car, and it was also just fun exploring along the way as you go. Oh look, this is where this car gained compared to that car. So you always had a variety. But then the 300 plus came along and I tested it, and I just felt like, I just felt bored because this is essentially a 300 plus in LVN. They took an LVN, they increased the grip a bit more, even though why you would do that because the LVN is already like insanely grippy. They gave it like unlocked top end power as well. So like there was no more downside, and there was no other cars. All other cars were pointless, especially with the cut fix, which in my opinion sort of like also ruined the whole speedrunning, because like the massive Yosemite jump cut in my opinion was pretty fun. And they fixed it, which I sort of didn't understand, because like, so you fix this one cut, but you leave every other cut.
It was such a half-assed thing to do.
Exactly. And
like,
especially...
Yeah, why even bother fixing one cut when like 50% of the rest of the race is still off-road? Like...
Exactly. So that, in my opinion, really, like, that sort of actually completely demoted me from even doing runs. Like, I didn't even do any try-hard runs, except like the initial ones, like to try out the car, because I was like, this race just feels like a downgrade, especially because that wasn't even the most inconsistent cut. That was actually one of the easier cuts once you learned it, the Yosemite jump. There's far more annoying cuts on New York that they didn't fix. So like, you didn't fix any of the annoying cuts. 90% of the other cuts are still there.
Oh,
so you fix this
one especially.
Yeah, so you fix this one. Radical. I had most of my 23s with traffic. So you fixed this one cut, just one, and you leave every other cut. That sort of just downgrades the race for me, because either you leave this leave this cut and you're like, just let us optimize the speed running, because it was something where
style.
Exactly, because like that was one cut where for example, the Regera gained huge amounts on air NOS. That cut, like the Regera was basically a NASA space program with the Regera on that cut. Like you would just gain so much relative to other cars, and it was interesting to see which car would gain more airtime, which car wouldn't. And then they fixed it, and it came to the point where, like, first of all, a lot of cars were taken sort of like downgraded a lot. For example, the Regera with the new cut is very far down the pace. It's no longer meta, I would consider. Even if the 300 plus didn't exist, I would consider it to be like underneath meta. It's more like it's more
to take more corners.
Yeah, because now it's like with the Regera, it's like it's top tier, but it's sort of like a flex, like if you did it, it's like, I'm that much better, I did it in a Regera. It's more of like a meta flex. And the long range it's still the way it is, because long range just didn't really get affected. But the issue is not that the 300 plus is in the game. engine power and NOS power is a lot more relevant and top end, and because like you need to conserve pace everywhere else. But if one of your area has a massive pace loss due to a cut being fixed, you need to conserve pace everywhere else. And with the 300 plus, it conserves pace everywhere. Anytime there is a acceleration section, you can dump all of the NOS initially with frenetic, because you know the moment you hit 460, you don't have to worry about dropping down. The car will keep going up. You don't have to worry about preserving NOS to keep up speed because the car will anyway keep up. So you could spend all the time on acceleration. So with this insane new OP meta car and that the race being ruined, like it's similar to what happened to Street Race PvP. To get back to my initial point I was trying to make, is that the game was ruined for me. Like it's just this one car. If I want to try hard in New York, if I want to do a New York stream, like my classic New York streams, which I used to do, I realized I'm gonna be slaved to this one car the whole time. There's nothing else. Otherwise, I won't get any meaningful results. Like sure I could try hard, but like try hard, it was fun because like you were talking, you were vibing with with your viewers, and you were having all sorts of shenanigans happen to you and bloopers at the same time while you were still try harding and speed running. But now all of a sudden like I couldn't really use the other cars, so like it became a lot more boring. So it's similar happen.
Would the game be significantly better to the point where we would continue playing it if the vehicle balance was good?
Probably no, from my end anyway, because with the contractor coming out, I just sort of like just start getting more and more jaded because like issues never get fixed with the game. I would probably still like continue the whole New York speedrunning theme on live streams, at least from my POV, especially if the cars were more balanced and if there were more to fuck with. Definitely. But at the end of the day, you still got like it would still hit me like my in the back of my head I would still have, man, I'm still getting held back by this shitty steering filter. View users will still be infinitely faster than me on New York. They have all the control in the world. They can dodge traffic with insane efficiency, and that would just still keep me jaded. And that, in fact, that was already keeping me jaded. But like, there was just this extra thing of being able to switch around cars and just doing a New York stream when I was bored and having people to talk to was nice, and showing people like, hey, because that was the most fun thing, is showing other people what you can do. Because a lot of people just didn't know. They didn't know about the long range. A lot of, for example, even newer gen tryhards, for example, like Wes, they thought the long range was shit. But then, like, I would show them on stream, like, hey, look at this pace. It's clearly not shit. It's actually pretty insane. And stuff like that. But now, like, I don't know. Like, aside from that, I don't think I would still play it. Especially with contractor and stuff coming out.
Personally, I just cannot get myself to play this game for a long time because I just end up being so frustrated that the car is not going where I want it to be going.
Absolutely agree. Absolutely agree.
All right,
I actually had a pretty decent time with when the BMW Z4 GT3 got updated, because for the first time in a long while, I felt like the car was actually responding to what I was doing. The new touring car update, like at least the ones we've had so far, like the cars feel responsive at least. But the problem is you need to turn up the aero to do it, because like the base handling model is still so understeery.
Yep.
You're still
But at
getting
least
to the wheel bias, sadly.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, that was the second issue. I was trying some events and I was doing what I thought pretty well. And then I saw some times of people on wheel who like in 10 minutes got like way faster times purely because they were not fighting the aero like I had to.
Yeah. Sadly, with all the handling changes, some of the underlying issues of the game, they just continue and intensifying them. Like they are never fixing the discrepancy between the different devices. It just remains there, and yeah, there's nothing you can do as a player. It's a very like composite issue always with this game. Like for one good thing, you always get surrounded like from all four sides with something negative still about the game, which is again it's just never going away. It's never going to be fixed.
I guess like
so yeah, why bother?
the person that probably plays the most is probably Feather still. So how is it from your point of view, Feather?
I mean, recently, it's only been recently that I started playing again. That was only because I I kind of knew the new Beetle, like for Rally Raid, was going to be kind of insane. I've driven around like when it first came out, just a little bit, and I was like, "Oh, this is going to be kind of nuts." I didn't think I was gonna actually. I need to get more and more time with it to understand how the suspension works, because that's the main part of Rally Raid, is how the suspension is going to mess.
RNG.
Yeah,
Right.
how that RNG is going to play out. Because for me, I'm not a feel type driver. Like I'm not going to claim to be. Like I'm not actually that good. I play a lot and I figure things out. I figure out all the little cuts and things that make the car fast. So so Rally Raid for me was mainly about keeping the speed up anywhere you can, getting the most out of all the nitrous you have. So when the car compresses, the suspension compresses, you get more grip, things like that. And then since and that was before the nitro, the air NOS came. It came in. Like I was already doing all that. When air nitros came in, I just felt like it was a slap in the face. I kind of didn't want to play anymore. I kept playing, and I kept playing a little bit just to kind of test things out. But I want other people to actually start beating my times. And when it took like a couple of months for people to actually start beating my my old times, it was kind of telling that people just didn't understand how to drive Rally Raid.
Yeah. That's something that I probably I have felt like was gonna affect you a lot. I feel like because New York, fuck that shit was affected insanely hard by air NOS, but like I imagine like it must have affected your Rally Raid a lot too, because like all this like muscle memory, all this tech you've developed, based on understanding the suspension, working with the suspension throughout the track, with on the bumps, on all terrain changes, all the tech has sort of been like it's sort of like a wrench has been put in it now that air NOS is a thing. It's like now it's like, oh, now I need to fucking conserve NOS because air NOS.
The reading of the terrain has actually kind of become like a lost art. Like recently, some people that have been competing with me, I see them getting up close to my times, and I see what they're doing. They're a lot of the focus is on being as air NOS, getting the most out of the air NOS and keeping the speed from the air NOS. Well, that's part of it, but what happens when you land? You're landing inside like a divot, and you can burst a little bit of NOS right there. You're instantly up to top speed, especially in the Beetle. The Beetle is insane. If you get grip on the tires, and you hit NOS, it's like a linear, like just speed, like what
instantly gets up to VMAX basically.
Yeah.
Can keep it. Yeah.
So
that's something. That's something I felt like must have been really annoying for you, because like you spend all this time, like essentially terrain, like developing the skill to read the terrain, like terrain reading skill, and now it's like a person can get that reward by simply hitting NOS in the air. So now it's like the skill has been reduced in the sense that like you don't have to read the terrain as much. You just try to memorize all the little bits of air, like airborne like bits where like the car is temporarily in the air, and based on that, and I feel like that in its own is so much less skill and so much has far less skill seeding than what you had to do on the OG Rally Raid with all your tech. Because like that's, to me at least, is very simple, because even on New York you do that to a great extent, is like just reading the terrain and just air NOSing based on whenever you're airborne or whenever there's a certain series of bumps along the cut. So you have specific NOS zones, and that's where you hold NOS, and then you don't hold NOS on the other sections. So I feel like that must have been pretty annoying for you, like because
I mean, it was, but like that let me push way further than way past what what old Slipstream was able to do. Like especially on Silent Woods, like I was able to push past way faster than that. And sadly, I don't know, I didn't push hard enough on the truck when that came out. I should have pushed harder with that, because now I can go way faster with the Beetle. Like the Beetle's like 2-3 seconds ahead on tracks that are essentially just straight lines. And that's just, I don't know, I feel like that's just not okay. That just shouldn't be a thing.
Yeah.
And The Beetle's downside is that the suspension is actually complete ass. And I found
Yeah.
a setup where it bounces, but you get minimal bounce when you land. So like you kind of just like scrunch on the ground. And that's it. Like you don't
Yeah.
bounce off it. That bounce off the ground can actually help you in some circumstances where you actually did tune the car to bounce off the ground when it lands, so that instead of because I would land on a flat bit, but the bounce will actually send me a little bit further and get me into another divot. And that's what I actually used on the Great Sand Dune a little bit here and there. So I could actually get the speed down. Actually, since that video on my sand dune run, my most recent one, I actually got the time down another second. And that was because I actually switched the suspension over to a stiffer feel. So when I land, I'm not bouncing. That ended up being faster on that track. Just because I optimize where I need to land and how and where the suspension is all compressing everywhere else.
I killed the discipline even more than it was before with making the meta such a frustrating RNG car. Like, by the way you just casually gap someone, like, you know, by seconds, and then improve another second after uploading it. Like, it's even less push than before now. Same goes for jet sprint. It's like almost just get the good random on the whatever, like almost like the suspension effect which that boat gets with the ridiculous speed of going up and down weirdly. Like
Are
you had that.
You're talking about the nose like bobbing up and down when you're just
Yeah.
going on. Yeah, okay.
Like when I did some runs, like when just turning this thing for the first time, like I understood that it's mostly now just about like sort of hitting that cycle good, like especially around some crucial parts like jumps and stuff. And other than that, you just keep your nose as high as possible, and that's it. Like you just eliminated like all of the skill of keeping the speed up, because it's appears out of nowhere, and it's all about hitting that cycle of the boat going up and down over the nose, and not about what you actually do like in corners and shit, because like it's actually slower like in some corners, but it makes for even less variation, because you're just making it like at a very safe speed in some of the corners. There's just nothing you can do to go ridiculously fast, and like a 1% possibility of surviving with keeping it smooth type of line, like which you would do on the Hornet. Like all those intricacies of keeping speed are gone.
It's something that's similar that I felt in air race whenever tricky was became more prevalent.
Well, tricky's always been a thing, right? Since the beginning of the game.
It's always been a thing. It's been a thing since launch. It's just nobody really pushed it. And I knew about it for a long time, but like I was under the impression back in the day that it was like it wouldn't be quite worth it, right? Because I never really truly pushed air race even back in the day. It was just because it was just one other guy, and it was Akubo-san, and I would beat his time. And then, like a week later, I'd be like, I'd look at the leaderboard and he's like, oh, he beat my time. And we would just go back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. And then, because of that, I mean, sometimes did eventually get pushed quite far, which was pretty nice. But the issue with tricky started happening is when the Airborne Summit came up. So, because that's where because it was me versus Akubo-san, we were competing for the top spot.
Yeah.
And that's when we started really sweating. That we were really sweating it out, because I was like, one guy's got to get the top spot. And it was actually on one of the crossovers. If you remember, there was a crossover with the Aerobatics Harman rocket on a rally raid track.
Salt Lake, I think it was.
Yeah, it was Salt Lake. And it was actually him that started it, but he didn't do it properly. Like, tricky was used on OG air race in the sense that, like, just the non-tricky air race. When you do when you do the loop,
Yeah.
the half loops in the air race. So there's a maneuver called the Immelmann. The Immelmann maneuver is basically what you do on the half loops. It's a flight maneuver that when you do a half loop, and then when you do a half loop, your plane is obviously inverted, and you roll right side up again. That's what you call an Immelmann. And the game actually recognizes the Immelmann maneuver just the way it recognizes rolls, snaps, split S. It gives you NOS for Immelmann. So the tricky was used in a very subtle way. You could actually gain a little bit of extra NOS after each half loop if you completed the Immelmann correctly, and you would see your NOS bar would jump up a bit. That would give you very precious extra tenths, which matter a lot because air race, like the moment you start pushing, it's all about the tiny tenths. It's just like jet sprint. You're pushing for milliseconds at that point. So like being able to NOS a bit more than usual was very valuable. It wasn't until there was the crossover in the Airborne Summit. So we were competing, and like I noticed in the crossover, like Akuba-san beat my time. I was like, okay. So, and it was like by like a lot, and I considered that to be fairly well optimized. So I was like, okay, how's this happening? So I checked his ghost, and I noticed he was snapping, but only the first part. He only snapped initially. He would snap very few times across the track, right? So I was like, oh, okay, I see what you're doing here. You're getting tricky. Now here's the funny part. So I was like. So I did that, and like I beat his time. But I was like, okay, it was okay. This is that. But then a thought came to my mind. What if I just do this along the whole track? Like the whole track I'm just snapping. What if I just hold the NOS down? And initially, like I had this idea a long time ago. It was like a fantasy theory. It was like an idea. I'm gonna clap everybody with a Pilatus doing tricky, and nobody's gonna know what the fuck happened. But like it was like sort of like one of those fever dreams that like I was like that sure it could happen, but like it would be way too ridiculous. Like nobody's ever gonna be stupid enough to like spend that time.
Yeah.
But sure enough, that day I was stupid enough. I did go through all the pain of optimizing the track and like actually like realizing. And initially yeah, nobody like even thought about doing that. Even I didn't. And Akuba-san also did it very little. But like after some practice, I actually got very close to the end, and I was like, holy shit, this is actually doable. Like there were times where like I would like go halfway and then like go halfway again. Like I'd sort of split it up. And there was one run where I actually kept it the whole time, and I was like, this is genuinely doable. You can actually do this the whole race. And I did it. And then I did it for every single race. And then, well, after that was it. I won the summit. Like I was significantly ahead, and there were reports of me cheating on forums. I'm not kidding. Like I remember, yeah. You guys remember that? What the mod,
yeah.
the TCC mod? He sent me a link. There was a guy on Ubisoft forums reporting me as a cheater, saying like, "Why don't you guys remove this cheater? It's obvious he's cheating in the summit." Blah 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 blah. The forum post was removed by that, I think. And there was in one of my non-TC2 videos on my YouTube channel, there was a guy called Crew GNU.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
He commented that I should stop cheating in the Crew 2. Like people were balding because nobody knew, nobody realized, and like nobody realized the ridiculous stupidity of tricky. It's just like resourceful, on the all-wheel drive cars. It's like you never run out of NOS if you can just do snaps, and it's because the game rewards you for snaps, and snaps are fairly easy to do. And so I applied that, on every single air race. But that's also where I sort of like, I was sort of like, I like the fact that I was like, holy shit, I actually managed to do tricky on every single air race. But at the same time, I was kind of like, also just disappointed. Because I was like, now it's like I've opened Pandora's box, because now you can't go back, right? Yeah. Once you do tricky, there's no going back. There's only pushing up. Yeah, and for the longest time,
everyone has to do that now in order to
exactly. And for the longest one, nobody did it because people saw
nobody was even in the same postcode even when they tried.
People said saw it. I mean, the closest one that I saw was Ozzy, and he was like, "Bro, I ain't even gonna try that shit. That's just way too ridiculous." And initially, I thought it was quite ridiculous too. But as I started doing it on more and more tracks, I got pretty comfortable with it. And it came to the point where I wasn't even using a gateway anymore, which was the refill you use, the refill perk. I was using full pure, full frenetic set. Full tricky, full frenetic set, or a full pure and full tricky set, like based on the track and plane. But that's like some other slight differences that matter from plane to plane. And yeah, it came to the point where I just really started optimizing it, and like I feel like my most decently pushed run, because a lot of the tricky times they weren't quite pushed, because tricky is quite annoying to push hard if you want to sweat it, because it's
Some
like
would say it is quite tricky.
Oh
yes.
my god!
Got him. Because
Wow, I'm assuming here, but the tech for tricky would be you go as straight as possible directly to the next checkpoint, right?
no, you go straight as you follow the racing line, just like you do normal areas. You just spin the whole time. And initially, like, because I was new to tricky and everybody else was, but like when tricky was new, I was the only guy who was doing it. And initially, because like like my goal wasn't even to do any racing line. My goal was survive, simply survive. Just try and keep the NOS not run out for the whole race. And if I did that, I considered it a success. Like if you look at my OG, I think I take them down now, but if you look at all my OG like airborne summit times, they were quite slow compared to what we have now. And but like after a while, I got more used to it. You also start incorporating the racing lines. The issue with tricky is that it's very fucky with some specific sections on some tracks, because there's some tracks, because like the way you do it is you snap throughout the whole time across a straight, right? But when there's a half loop or there's a maneuver coming, you obviously don't do tricky. You just do the turn normally. And if you miss one snap, and the difference of missing one snap on specific tracks can be like you overshot by 1 degree on your rolling, right? And that's you missed the snap. And when you're really pushing the limits on, for example, tracks like Vegas has a downhill section between two buildings where like you do sort of an S maneuver. And that whole time you're not using tricky because you're doing like the S maneuver properly. And if you want to follow the proper racing line, you gotta make sure your NOS tank with tricky is fully filled up from the top before you go in. Otherwise, you're gonna run out of NOS before, like by the time you won't be able to recover it again. And that sort of stuff, like it got really like just really like min-maxed. And I did sort of push times hard, because like after a while I noticed like there was like DS Zama. There was a Chinese guy who started pushing tricky times. I was like, okay. So I started pushing tricky times. So, and I like initially I would use gateway, but I started pushing them by just removing gateway and only going full power on the nitrous only. And that's where I started pushing more and more. And that's also around where I discovered the Zivco. The Zivco made everything. That's another thing like that I hated about tricky, is the fact that they also made everything irrelevant. All other planes, right? All other planes, the whole like delicate plane meta that we actually had that many people don't know actually got like destroyed, because there was the extra 330 SC, and then there was the Zivco. And when I discovered the Zivco and the true potential, the extra 330 SC also fell apart. The Zivco was the only plane that could really do anything, because it had the highest top end. Yeah, like after that, I sort of like, I was like, after I did some sort of like decent pushed runs, not quite full push, like not optimized, because like I still didn't sort of follow the racing line. I was like, okay, if I can get a good run going without the NOS dipping ever below 10%, below 90% NOS capacity. So like I can never use more than 10% NOS in the tank. It has to be always full, because NOS power needs to stay at maximum for full power. I considered it a good run.
I actually didn't know that that's how high you need to keep it. I thought like you could like let it fluctuate like down like 50 or something.
Initially you could, but if you want to min-max, if you want to fully like go fast as possible, you gotta have full NOS. If you're half a NOS, you're losing out.
Oh, okay.
Like the other guy will stay, because like during maneuvers you will actually stay. You will stay like you will lose speed again. This is why you use frenetic, because frenetic, over the time you build up so much frenetic, you can actually afford to go half tank, and because you still have so much NOS power, it plateaus. So like even at the bottom tank, you'll be at like Vmax, like you'll be at your theoretical speed cap. That's why I use frenetic. But I was sort of like, also like, this is where I sort of got jaded, because I was like, man, now that I've opened this, all the subtle lines that you had to do in air race back in the day, the very precise, because like back in the day, air racing was all about your racing line, all about your NOS pattern, like, and you had to min-max them really well, and you had to be like super smooth on the turns. And if you were super smooth on the turns and you min-maxed your NOS pattern, you got very, very strong gains. Like the gains was maybe 0.2 seconds, which to the average, to a person would might look, okay, that's not a big gain. But like to somebody who's tryharding air race and you gain 0.2 seconds, you're like, wait, what the fuck? That's like a light year. Because it's like, imagine on a fully pushed jet sprint and you gain 0.2 seconds. It's ridiculous. And that's how it was. But with Tricky, it was like, it sort of somewhat removed that component, but like the component became a lot more like how well can you just snap, which like I found a bit more boring. So that's where I sort of like started getting away.
How well you can cope with the fucking emotion sickness.
Yeah, like because like it was no longer about just like, because the thing I like about Ares is like you had to have a good understanding of a 3D racing line. It's not just a 2D racing line like with cars. It's a 3D racing line because it's 4 dimensions, right? So like how well can you optimize, how early can you pull up on the half loops, how high can you just like skim the bottom like layer of paint of your plane to the checkpoint and then turn like that, just turning as early as possible, maximizing the racing line and gaining times in like with the ways that the average person just doesn't understand. And that was the skill. Like if you can see the line that most people just will never see, they just see how is he gaining? He's flying the same as me. How is he gaining? But like if you can see that, and that skill was really nice. It's sort of like the subtleties of rally rate suspension, right?
Yeah.
But the Tricky, that sort of got that the importance of your smoothness. Smoothness was very important. Like how smoothly you take a turn, because there were turns you don't want to take. You don't want to take them like full stick. If you take them full stick, you're unnecessarily bleeding speed, especially in the X-Prep 330 SC. That thing was very, very prone to losing speed. You have to be very smooth with that. The Wacko is very brain dead. That thing is on rails. You can just pull back. That thing will just do full speed. But the 330 SC was like a car on high aero. It had a lot of NOS power, but like you had to really like be smooth with it. And Akubo-san was very good with that plane. And like if you were smooth with that, you could gain just in slight turns. For example, the best example was the turn, the downwards S on Vegas. Being smooth through that downwards S would gain me so much time on Akubo-san and other people. Like for example, Zoma, when Zoma started pushing, because he was on keyboard, I would gain so much time on the extra, on the extra plane, just by being smoother on that one section. But like now with Tricky, it was like you could just keep up with not necessarily with your optimized racing line because like your snaps were like on point. So it became more of like a snap game, It's like those dance games where you just hit the button combos, right? And that's all.
That's sort of
yeah. So that's sort of like I was like, okay, well, I kind of fucked everybody over by opening Pandora's box. But I'll blame Akubo-san. Fuck you. He's the one who started it. Okay, I just pushed it to the limit.
You can't really be blamed for a mechanic that was always in the game. Like it was a matter of time and like a person starting it.
Exactly. Like I just happened to be the person who was interested in air race the most, so I happened to be finding it. But like now you see, like there's people who beat my times. There's other people who are doing it tricky at very optimal pace, and so it was only a matter of time till other people picked up on it. But yeah, Tricky is just like with air race and rally, air NOS and rally raid, or Deco's experience with jet sprint is like Tricky sort of just reduced my interest in air race a lot, because air race was always a thing of smoothness. And I think the reason why I liked air race, which most people think, why do you like this dead ass discipline? Because it was, to this day, even with Tricky, it is bar none the most consistent discipline. There is no you cannot make excuses for being slow in air race. You just can't. You can't say this bump fucked me over, the fucking, something distracted me, the traffic, there's nothing in the way. You're in the air. There's physical checkpoints don't slow you down. The checkpoints, even if you hit them, they don't slow you down one bit. There's nothing physical. It's all racing line. And that's what I like. It's pure, it's the most consistent. There's no turbulence, there's no RNG mechanic, there's no suspension you have to worry about. It's pure skill, honestly. And that was the most fun part. And just like mastering the racing line, optimizing the NOS patterns to the point where you could get those times, that was the fun part. But now it's like Tricky, if you think about it, it takes NOS management away completely because you don't have to think about where do I NOS, where do I don't, where do I not NOS. It's just like hold NOS button down, keep the tank full with Tricky. The whole mechanic of like optimizing the NOS pattern just right, and like being smooth, losing as little speed as possible, which I suppose that's still a thing, but Tricky even, but like not so much because the NOS is so strong after a while that's built up with Tricky, it'll just push you through anyway. Any speed penalty you get from turning too much doesn't matter. Whereas before, not being smooth punished you significantly. I remember like, Wes, for example, I remember Wes back in the day was trying on Jersey a lot and he was just losing time everywhere. And I was like, told him, you got to be more smooth. But like people just didn't understand the concept of being smooth. But now it's like the Tricky is like, it doesn't matter. It just doesn't matter. It's like the whole point of NOS management is taken away because your tank is anyway, it remains full because you're doing Tricky, right? It remains full. Racing lines are still there, but like they are only half as important because like what's more important is your tank stays full all the time.
The racing line would be like you need to be pushing to the absolute max. Someone who needs to be,
Exactly. Racing line would only be like you turn only when you really need to turn. Like you Tricky to the last possible second, to the as far as you can into the turn, and then you start turning. Whereas before it was like there were turns you had to set up well in advance. And with the new handling, that's another thing that really like rubbed me in the face the wrong way. The new handling has had a auto knife flight assist. So the auto knife flight assist is it prevents you from losing height, right? So if you in the new plane handling, if you do a knife flight, you will see your plane actually maintains height, and it doesn't lose height. It actually loses speed, and that's because the game is applying rudder for you. You don't see it, but it's applying very subtle amount of rudder for you, very very subtle, and I found that very annoying, because like in the OG air race handling, which was a lot more natural and much more closer to like a real plane, like when you go on a knife flight, the pilot has to manually adjust the rudder to not lose height, right?
Yeah.
But there were sections in air race, for example, especially the downwards S section, where you go into a knife flight because you anyway have to do a knife flight turn. But because you're in a knife flight, you let gravity accelerate you further down, But you can't do that tech anymore because like now it's like you have knife flight preventing you. So there was so specific tech where like you were in a knife flight and you just naturally let the plane fall into the right line, into the checkpoint. And that sort of skill has taken away. So that already I was sort of very annoyed by because there was a lot of small subtle tech that sort of got taken away with the OG air race handling. And then but it was still nice. It was the handling was still decent. It was still fun. But the Tricky, it was over. Like I opened Pandora's box at that point, and it was just like Just Dance, button smashing. It's like, how well can you keep this max?
If the plane couldn't Tricky, it was just dead.
Exactly. That's what holy shit. You brought up a good point. I almost forgot. The meta gone. What meta? Gone completely. So on the OG air race, you had three distinct meta planes, right? You had the Spitfire, which was the all-rounder. The Spitfire had great NOS. It had good engine power. The engine power didn't really matter though, and it had insane handling. So it was it was like a balanced tune, right? It was like a balanced vehicle. It was good in all sorts of like every area, but not like excelling in specifically anything. And that's what made it so nice. It was just intuitive. It was very easy to fly, and it got all of its pace through handling. In fact, if you notice, the Spitfire has a very slow takeoff to this day. And so like even though like planes like the Wacko would like initially gap it, you would see through corners the Spitfire just gains, and that's why the Spitfire was meta initially. And then you had like meta like the Wacko. The Wacko was pure cornering god. Right, it had insane takeoff. So like first, it was like an all-wheel drive car. Like so, first you gap the Spitfire at the straight, and then you have your turn radius is very wide, but you keep massive amounts of speed, throughout a loop. So like you keep a lot of speed. So when you NOS, you hold like almost 400 on the old handling. So you could do like turns at 400 almost. So like your loop might have been very wide, but because you completed the loop so much faster, you anyway were at a higher exit speed. And you exited the loop earlier than the Spitfire. And then there was the fact that it also had very strong NOS power. And then you had the Extra 330 SE, which was the most difficult plane in terms of smoothness to master, but it had the highest NOS power. So on shorter tracks, the Extra was the king. The Extra and the Wacko was the king. The Wacko was king on like pure handling tracks like Vegas, which were still sort of short, but not actually Vegas is fairly long, but like handling tracks like Black Mount, which sort of like they're fairly long and they only have one half loop, but like they're not long enough to the point where the Spitfire can like gain on corners. And then you have the tracks like Vegas or like other or the which I can't remember the Canyon Air Race, where you have so many half loops that the Spitfire just gains everything on the corners. So you had this beautiful meta that like among three planes that were distributed, and then you have like off meta planes which were actually quite close to meta, like the Slick 360 HP. And then you had like the blazing shots change, which sort of like removed some planes out of the question. Like the Spitfire, well, it ceased to exist. It was garbage after that. It was like pointless because like they made it very heavy. The roll rate was significantly slower and the pitch rate was slower. And the new handling made it so that you widen your turn now a lot more when you hold NOS.
Wait, so
whereas in the old
actually, I think a lot of people don't understand that planes actually did get touched at some point.
Yeah.
And
so
and there's also another thing that I don't think people quite know is that you can actually like for the rudders you can actually change that to an analog input and actually have way finer control over it instead of just the left and right button.
There was a period of time where I actually was using analog rudders on Air Race, but that was on old. When you still had to be smooth in Air Race, because obviously throttle didn't matter. You full throttle the whole time in Air Race. So like analog rudders mattered more. So that's actually a good point you brought up. And basically the plane handling got changed. Like so, the stall characteristics of the plane got changed, and the angle of attack. Angle of attack is like how much angle can you replace? So you know how a car can get angle? You know, if it's a drifty car, it can get more angle relative to where it's going. It's just like that with a plane, but in the air. So angle of attack is like how high can your nose pitch relative to your actual velocity, where you're really going. And planes on the old handling could get very high AOA, so angle of attack. So like the Pilatus could basically do 90 degrees. It could do a Cobra maneuver essentially, and like you could keep going in the same direction. And other planes had it fine-tuned to a very subtle range, but like that's what gave the Spitfire such an edge, because it could keep in this optimal state of drift in the half loop, and that would that drift was just sharp enough, but not sharp enough to the point to bleed off too much speed, and that's what gave it such a good cornering ability. And also like it was like jet sprint where you actually held NOS during corners because it would accelerate you further, and because like the way planes work in real life is like you pull up. You lose speed, you bleed energy. The way you compensate for that is you increase thrust, right? You increase thrust, you push through to keep the speed up. And that's what you did. But now it's like they sort of made this like weird arcadey thing where like the plane is much more on rails, the angle of attack limiter is significantly more limited. So it significantly more limits like how much pitch authority you have during the turn. And when you NOS, because you no longer have that better pitch authority, better pitch control range, like your angle is a lot more limited, your turn gear gets wider, and that killed the Spitfire completely. They made it heavier, and they also made it so that all planes turn wider. So like the Spitfire, when you NOS in the corners, because you need to NOS in corners even now in Air Race, if you don't do tricky, the Spitfire was completely taken out of the picture. The Mustang was also something that was always very close, which people don't remember. Was very close to the Spitfire back in the early days, but like with the new handling, this Mustang and both Spitfire got the hit with that heavy plane. I guess they wanted to make the bigger planes feel heavy or something. But they got completely killed off, and they were useless. So Spitfire gone. Waco was surprisingly actually still similar. That's why like I recommend like a lot of people, they had a lot of issues with the handling and nobody liked it actually. And a lot of people were asking me, hey, what plane would you recommend? I recommended every with the Waco because it was the least untouched plane in the sense that it got to change the least amount. It still felt very similar to its old counterpart. It was the same, high cornering, good strong NOS. Extra actually got helped easier. It was made more noob friendly because it was very hard to be smooth with, but now the AOA got changed, it got more subtle, so it was easier to get the pace out of. But it was still fairly hard aircraft, like compared to the other two. So now you had the Extra and you had the Waco, these two. The Spitfire was gone. So like the meta was significantly reduced to two planes. And then the obviously with Tricky, the Zivco came along, and with Tricky you have the Extra, and actually not even the Extra, just the Zivco. The Tricky just has one meta plane. That's it. That's it. Like with Tricky, everything just got downgraded after the handling change.
Did you ever check if your Tricky stuff got beaten by now? Like if
They did,
anyone
yeah,
even got
I
good
did.
at it.
They did. Yeah, they did. I think Netrex and some other person got beat it. Some guy starting
Yeah.
with K.
So the people who just know life this game still. Okay.
Oh yeah, but one time I'm still proud of, which I'm actually surprised because my other times which weren't really that pushed got beaten by like a second or something, which was pretty surprised by. Which was like it was like okay, that's nice. But something that I was pretty surprised by is my Jersey time. It's still only like nobody has gone under 50. Because there were times where I was under 50 pace, but I never really pushed it because Tricky is such a piece of shit to like. You gotta remember, like you miss 1 degree of like in snap, it's over. Restart the run. That's it. If you're really min maxing it, so like I never really pushed it, but like I pushed it to the point where it was 50.6 something, and it's still around. Everybody's still around hovering around the 50 area. So that's I guess
I
most
have a
pushed
moment
Jersey
like that
time.
in Jet Sprint as well. The the track which is still the most the closer one is, I think it's Colorado, the riverbanks. People, I think only like one PlayStation guy pushed it somewhat, but I cannot vouch if he really unlocked that new boat because it's
Yeah.
still like only maybe a second quicker than what I did. What I did on the Hornet, like on my laptop, still like not even on my proper PC. It's ridiculous how that a
Yeah.
discipline can be when like they added new meta. It's much faster. You would think people would be all over that shit, but instead it's like almost the opposite effect. Like the names interested in Jet Sprint, including me, like I think most depth, like the only like guy who actually maintained the interest is that PlayStation guy, and everyone
Yeah.
else like kind of just depth because people like me who would be propping up that interest, they are gone. And that boat isn't even nice to drive, like to be honest. Like the way it corners, it reduces the smoothness aspect because
I saw it. I felt that the rocket you're talking about, right? The jet boat.
it,
Yeah,
it
I
will
tried
always
driving.
hit that sort of like
It always felt
hard
like a
lean
downgrade.
into the corner.
Yeah, it always felt like a downgrade to the Hornet. I never liked that boat really.
And then on the straight, you have this giga weird camera movement. On the flat water, you're just going so like obscenely up and down that it's just not a pleasure to be driving that boat.
Yeah. One thing I noticed on Tricky as well is like I noticed people actually got worse in their racing lines because Tricky has so much more importance on keeping the NOS tank up. So like the most fun I had in air race after Tricky was on one event where it was a Daytona air race and it was with a Mustang. Now with a Mustang you can't really Tricky, it's not really worth. So you have to fly normally. And everybody's times were so slow. I remember because I hadn't tried it for the longest time. I even forgot the NOS pattern, but like I beat it first try. Like I got world record first try on the summit. And then I optimized it further and nobody even got anywhere close. Like not even close. So like the Tricky actually made a lot of people worse. Like nobody even know, like the air race is a lost art now. Like the OG air race of like falling racing lines is a lost art. Nobody knows the concept of optimizing a 3D racing line anymore. It's all just Tricky. So yeah, highly unfortunate, but oh well.
Would you play more if they removed Tricky?
Yeah, but only if the game actually got better again, which is not gonna get.
Like I feel like the entire like rant section of this podcast, which has been the past hour and 20 minutes, like what would it need? What would the game need for us to return back to the game and have a good time?
I feel like for me,
or like, do we have to accept that we had our fun in the game and that it's just gone and that we just need to find something else?
I
That's
think it's
where-
just find something else.
yeah, that's also where I'm at right now because like I've given up on hope that the game would ever get better. So I'm like, okay, we've had our fun, we had our days.
And it's never
And
going
we
to
pushed.
be like we got the cutoff point
Exactly,
coming up
like
now
we
with the
got
Motorfest
the
announcement. We
Yeah,
are
we
out
got
of
the-
time.
yeah we got the like the good the good vibes back in the day, but
Because then the next question I feel would be, what does Motorfest need to be a game that we can enjoy from the start and continue to enjoy until it eventually ends in like
so
5-6 years probably?
first of all, the number one thing motor shit needs to be not shit is it needs good handling, good fucking responsive handling, like with a steering that's not delayed or it doesn't feel a steering that just feels natural, right?
And the one which
Like-
doesn't hard cap you versus a certain
Exactly, something
device.
that doesn't like bias towards certain input devices, and something that just feels right. It just feels natural, right? Like it feels responsive. By natural means it needs to feel responsive. It needs to feel linear. It needs to feel so that when the player turns a certain amount of the game, that the car turns a specific amount of the game, so that the player knows, okay, I turned this much, the car is going to turn this much.
Or
Not
at least
that-
be customizable to the point
Exactly.
where you can turn that on and know what to expect from the vehicle.
Exactly. It's not
Yeah.
it's not so like I turned this much. Oh, okay, the car isn't quite responding. Oh, it's turning now. Okay. It's turning. Okay, shit, I actually overturned. Let me correct it. Oh, it's not correcting. It's still going the same direction. Oh, I'm dead now. You know. So that's the number one thing. Aside from that,
I want to play devil's advocate to that. Just spend more time in the game. You'll understand how the car works. Smile.
I feel like understanding is not the issue here. Like we have all played inner drive handling for so much. Like we know what the handling does, but we can still find it shit to drive.
because so the argument to that question is yes, he could, but like it's just like you could also get a world record on New York with a potato controller, you know, with a banana that's charged to electricity and a potato that's charged to electricity.
Yeah.
You know, if you just spend 10 years just every day, you will also get a world record of this, you know. But it's like you get my point, right? It's like, yeah, you can, but like that's not the way it should be, you know. You can learn and guess if you just know like one single car, you can learn eventually just the steering curve of that car, and sure, you can get it around a corner, but it's only will be for that one specific track, that one specific section, that one specific scenario, that one specific car. Every car has a different steering curve, and a steering curve that goes through its set predetermined curve, like at its own speed. It's not. We gotta remember, like, it's not, the steering curve isn't defined by how, like, you know, how we are using the stick. Like, no matter how violently or how, like, slowly, smoothly we turn the stick, the steering curve goes through a set determined speed at a set determined rate every time. And we are basically essentially at the mercy of how well we can, like, make the steering curve wrap around that corner. If it's a corner that the steering curve is awkward, we struggle. You have to, like, you know, just play around. And the whole point of, like, the whole skill in gamepad, like this applies to street race, hypercar, and stuff like that. Obviously, rally raid is different.
Yeah.
Because there's different levels. There's a different skill involved in rally raid with the whole thing you talked about. But in corners, like, that's the issue. The moment, like, you have to do any sort of natural adjustment, you can't do it. So the gamepad involves, you know, it involves hours and hours of trial and error. That's the worst recipe for handling. If your handling relies on trial and error, it's not a good handling. Because it's like somewhere you fucked up and another player has to do guesswork. The player has to do guesswork of how to get the steering curve around the corner. Whereas a wheel user, within, you know, a time that you might have set in 2 hours, a wheel user can come in within 10 minutes, he can get close to that time, or he can beat it consistently. Consistency. Go on.
You want to be more player skill focused rather than just having the muscle memory.
Yes, it has to feel natural. Like the player, like muscle memory obviously will always be, at the end of the day, whenever any physics-based thing gets pushed, muscle memory will become the dominant factor, right?
Yeah.
But like the player it needs to be also rewarding player skill, you know, how smooth the actual player is, other than, you know, how good is the player at getting used to this predetermined curve. Because that's what, like, you know, wheel users, it's all about the player's wheel user's skill. How well can he control the car?
Yeah.
And like consistency is something that people forget about in racing games, right? People like in TCC, like some of the people, like the later new gen competitive players will make the argument gamepad is on the same pace as, like, it's the same as wheel. There's no real discrepancy, because look at this time I have gotten this time on gamepad that I've gotten on wheel. They don't talk about the fact that they just broke a fucking controller trying to do that time.
They spent the last 3 days, didn't eat, didn't sleep.
They literally, like, that's what I'm.
They dedicated like an entire, you know, 3 days to breaking a record that
Meanwhile,
a user just logged on and like was eating a sandwich with one hand and like was wearing one sock and one shoe, and he was like
the best example is New York. Like Root talked to me about, like, when he did his shoe on 300 plus sub 23. He DM'd me and we had to talk about the car. He told me he did one try. That was a one-shot run you're looking at. He didn't even try. And yet you look at gamepad users who are trying with on the 300 plus, like people like Rhino, they are playing only New York every single day almost, and they still can't get anywhere close to that time. You know, that's something that people don't get. Like, you know, people say, "Oh, gamepad is the same pace." See, I've got the same time. See, this is the same time. This is close to wheel. Yeah, but how long did it take you? How many tries did it take you, and how fast did the wheel user get it? If the wheel user gets something in 10 minutes and you have to spend a day, that's not the same. People underestimate consistency. Consistency is a direct display of like how much better something is, right? That's what they don't understand. It's like there's literally people in the new gen community that like they sweat for days on a single track. Like if you sweat for a race to try and match a wheel user's time that's been set in an hour, that's not these two devices are not the same. You know,
All right, so
it's just like if you have a fucking potato controller. Yeah, but 10 years you could also get a real pace if you practice that shit. You know?
so some people might interpret that as, I just don't know the track, and I have to spend that much time to learn the track. While the other person already spent the time to learn that track. But some people don't understand that, like, oh, I got this time now because
I feel like with very advanced players, track knowledge is minimal. Like especially on like circuits or something, like I was doing with the touring cars. Like we know the track. Like it takes maybe 5 to 10 minutes to know the track.
Okay.
And then after that, it's just getting the car to where the car needs to be. And on keyboard especially, that is so stupidly hard. So that it just takes a long ass time. And then on wheel, you just like one shot those things.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, absolutely. Although I would still like to hear Feather's like take on it. So what were you gonna say, Feather?
Oh no, that was a G4. Sorry.
I can water down this entire point. This game, Motorfest, if they want to be competitive at all, you know, then they need to focus all those like balancing, device, you know, truck, car, content type of issue fitting the competitive scene. But like, also like they could just not bother. Like if they are going to make it a game that doesn't have any claims like in terms of like competitive stuff, they are not going to tell us in the trailers that they are, you know, doing a huge job to keep up with the competitive stuff, which, you know, clearly they didn't really do that in TC2. They never really finished with it. Like if they can just I guess tell us to not even bother with the competitive stuff, that could also be fine. Like if the game has like, you know, other redeeming qualities, like not every game has to be competitive. They can just, you know, make a good base game in our senses.
It's not about being competitive though. Like that's sort of just shooting yourself in the foot as a developer, because what that means is you're not building a dedicated community. The moment you don't have a dedicated community, you don't have a long-term community. Your game has very little long-term capability. And if you want to, like, let's say, like, but I mean, like, if like every game these days is heading towards live service, and if the game is gonna be live service, like, which we don't know yet, but like if it is a live service model, you're shooting yourself in the foot the moment you say that, because it's like what you're saying is like, okay, we have a preset experience. There's nothing really interesting in it. There's nothing to get into depth. You play through the game once, you get all the cars, you do all the races, you're done. It's over. And then you log on every now and then. That's just, at that point, you're shooting yourself in the foot as a developer, because you no longer have the dedicated community that logs on every day, plays, you know, that keeps the game alive. Because whether or not, like, you know, you can talk all about, oh, the majority is the one that brings in the money, blah, 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 this, that, casuals. But the reality is, when, you know, during downtimes, when the game is at an all-time low, it is the dedicated community that keeps the game going, you know. And TC2, it was the constant PvP events, you know, it was us that were constantly like streaming the game, doing shit, you know, so Huron constantly streaming PvP that got actually casuals into the game and actually got them more attracted, and actually attracted more attention towards the game. So when you don't build that competitive, not even competitive, that dedicated community, which is built by having, you know, engaging mechanics, you don't need to be competitive a competitive game to have engaging handling, engaging mechanics. Handling that is just feels right, that feels nice to drive. If you can just get a dedicated community, you can get that. But if the moment you say, okay, well, we have nothing else to offer, think about what it does to you for your product. It basically says, okay, this product is not really worth anything. It's gonna be like Need for Speed Heat or Unbound, where like people jump on it, they play it. After 2 weeks, it's forgotten. It's not even in the public mind anymore.
They play Need for Speed like a single player game. Like nowadays, I feel
Exactly.
like that's what people are doing. They just rush through the story.
That's exactly what it is, though.
Spit out all their shit, and at end game, what do you got? Some PvP, like some races and stuff like that. And I feel like that's not like what else is there to do after that? That there's not much to do afterwards, considering how the handling is also kind of weird too.
Exactly, like when the handling is also just so bad, you can't even get a dedicated community based on the concept of mastery. The intent to master something that that is so rewarding for many players, like people like us, at least me, that makes us play these games for so long. I certainly didn't play TC2 so long because I liked the content. So like having something that has a depthful handling model that is also fun and engaging, that like encourages the player, makes them ups the player's curiosity to try and master this, get better at it, and then also providing the necessary platform to do that with, which is in the form of a good PvP system, a good matchmaking, incentives to play PvP, like having like a ranking system that's a bit more fleshed out, a support system that's a bit more fleshed out, clans, crews, actual, tags, customizability, badges you can earn in PvP, and then good tracks, adding new tracks every now and then. Like I like the fact that in TC2 where like they would add new tracks, and making sure the tracks are variable. Make sure the tracks are variable. They have good amount of variety in roads and corners, and just they're not all the same, and make sure they're all straight line, and also making sure that like the car balance is in a good spot. It doesn't have to be perfect. It doesn't even have to be good. It just has to be serviceable. That's the like word I'm gonna be using. It just has to be serviceable.
So when I hear that, when I hear that, I think about Forza, and like the handling model is serviceable. The balance is serviceable for the most part when you ignore like weird extreme power builds. There is a PvP system. It has like varying tracks. Like there's a decent amount to do. But what is stopping Forza from being that game that we play 3,000-4,000 hours?
That's literally what people are doing, though. Hiron is doing that. Deco is getting into it.
I'm also playing it, but
so
I kind of dropping off
exactly.
on playing it
Urza
too.
Urza is playing it, and I shit on Forza all the time. I say it's dog shit and that, but even though I quote unquote say I only play this as a casual game, I have 270 hours in Forza Horizon 5. So
okay, but like you have almost 3,000 hours in TC2. Like what is stopping you from doing the same that you did with TC2 early on?
Because TC2 had some things that Forza doesn't have. For example, like I have issues with Forza's balancing system. I don't like the PI system straight up. I completely disagree with how it treats cars and how it just screws over cars. I like the more simplified arcade version of like TC2 where it's like cars to scale up linearly. That's it. You can't like swap an engine, you can't swap drivetrains, you can't put different kinds of tires on it to like min-max and find a car that hits just the right sweet spot. That sort of stuff like prevents me. And also like TC2, the reason why I played it so much outside of planes, which got my interest, was New York. I love like long races with hypercars or like road cars. So that really hits my vibe. Like long races with road cars, and not like with a nice, because like that's something that Forza just simply can't offer it. The map isn't big enough for that. So like New York is honestly like what keeps me playing. Like that race is just a very nice race. It's a very well balanced race, and you can play it and you can have a lot of fun with it. Even if you're not doing cuts, if you're just doing a no cuts run, it's a very nice race to play. And I do that on Forza. That's what I do. Like, and I log on, I do Goliath, I do Colossus. I try some S1 cars with Urza or something or Hiron, and that's what we do. And that's all I really do on Forza. But like what detracts me away from Forza is like I have to make sure every time I get into Forza is just mainly just the PI system. I can't just put on parts on a car like in TC2 and like just drive in that class. I was like, because like if I do that, if I just put random parts and just like max it to S1900, it's gonna be complete garbage compared to a car that's properly built. Every car you have to first see, does it even work? And then there's cars, even if you like properly build them, they still will just be completely garbage, like 10 seconds, 15 seconds off pace off of a good car, not even meta, just a good car. And that's what keeps you from playing Forza. It's just the fact that it doesn't have the linear upgrade, and the PI system is, because of its complexity, it just kills a lot of cars. So that's my issue with it. I like the more linear cell where like, okay, this car can only be upgraded in this way, and that's it. And it has that's it. Like it's just there, and that is its personality, that is its character, and you just learn that car. It's sort of like a hero shooter. It's like there's different kinds of heroes. You learn the hero accordingly. You don't like change the hero out to like min-max parts on it and shit. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm
so
actually
PI system for me.
I'm actually on with John about that one. I love the aspect of building cars and making it how I want. But as soon as I brought into PvP, complete shit. Maybe it was just me, just not being good at the game. I just didn't spend enough time with it. I have 1,000 hours in the game already, but like just about half of that is just me fucking around with cars, not actually driving. I probably have like 300 hours maybe in just PvP. That's nothing compared to what other people are putting into that.
Exactly. Like, I mean, even Feather, like, he says he doesn't play it a lot, and he already has 1,000 hours. So if we are still playing Forza, like, it is very demoralizing for me to like get a car and like, hey, Lexus LFA, it's a cool car. Let me try the S1. Oh, it's bottom tier garbage. The Enzo is so much faster than the LFA, even though it's in the similar class. This 458 Speciale, it's not even, it's in a different like league. It's a light years ahead of this car, Whereas in TC2 is like, I can get in hypercar. Okay, Corvette C7. It's slow, but it will still compete. You can still go, 400 plus. You can still compete in a similar class. You still feel like you're driving a hypercar. Whereas with in Forza, like it's so min-maxed that you can't just take any car into PvP, and even not even be like competitive. You can't even race. You'll be like left in the dust. You'll be like racing solo basically on your own the whole time, even if you race perfectly. And that's what annoys me.
I feel like that's interesting, considering like earlier in the stream we talked about how Street Race has such a massive variance in pace.
Now it does, and that's why we also stopped playing it, though. Right? That's why that's why I also said I wouldn't play PvP anymore. So because
I considered TC2's golden age being just before Interdrive. Like I was actually starting to get into more rally raid. I was actually starting to figure out what cars were nice. What the spread of cars in rally raid was actually very nice, but people only gravitated towards the maxi just because the suspension actually worked. If all the suspension was perfect, like actually worked as intended, you could use so many other cars. I didn't realize that you could just put down the rebound to stock, like just stock suspension on all the cars. For rally raid, none of them had the wheel clipping issues. If you just ran stock suspension, you could like tweak it a little bit, and the car would be completely fine throughout the rest of the track. You wouldn't have too many back flipping incidents and stuff like that.
Interesting.
You like things like the was a car that was really competitive. Like people just never drove it. Was the Ford GT. The Ford Mustang. Like that was actually really nice. That was like a complete I think it's like ivory tower design. I don't think that actually exists in real world.
Yeah,
it's a TC1 model.
TC1 model, yeah.
Like those cars are actually really nice. Same thing with the Camaro. That was actually really nice. The suspension handled nicely.
The Camaro is my favorite rally raid car in the game. So from TC1 and TC2. I love the way it looks. It's a great looking rally raid car.
It looks good. It handles decently, like bump wise, but because of the introduction of actually I knocked on air nitrous being garbage and all that, but that was only because you could gain nitrous while using nitrous.
Mm-hmm.
That's where I kind of drew the line. It was just way too powerful. It didn't need to be that strong. But now, currently, how Nitrous works now, I kind of like it because you get faster speeds. What I don't like now is is just the two cars that everyone uses. The speed tour events were actually kind of nice to use other cars because the Hummer was it H1 or something like that.
HX concept, you mean?
Yeah, HX concept. That's what it was. Yeah, that is actually pretty nice on the speed tour events because that's the only one that has like really good cornering.
Yeah, because it's beta handling.
Yeah, because it's data handling. And other cars that have probably been good there would be like the Mini Countryman, but that's also I think kind of beta handling a little bit.
Yeah, there's like several different cars now. Even in drift, there's beta handling cars too. The Lancer has beta handling drift. That has it has more grip than the other cars.
Wait, really? That's
Yeah. Like literally every fucking handling model is fucked in some way.
It's way more grippy. I don't know if we strayed too far already. Like that point which I triggered the last rant with about the competitive and the game maybe also, offering something else. Forza actually has a perfect example of offering that something else. Like when the PvP itself may not be interesting in that sense for many players. The game does give something else in terms of like the track creation tools and stuff, and having the option of doing the completely custom stuff there privately.
It also facilitates like all these tournaments and team wars that people are doing. Like it does build up the dedicated
the ground
community.
for the community to make the competitive themselves, which that fallback the crew series doesn't have at all. Like that's like part of what I was trying to say with the competitive stuff from devs. Like if they
That
are
is
not
actually
up
a really
for
good point.
themselves, like
Yeah,
at least make something in the game which would give an option to the players to fill that void.
It's the
Otherwise,
same
like if
reason-
they do the same half-ass stuff as TC2, like it's just not going to cut it again. Like I'm not
It's-
going to be
yeah.
interested to sweat it.
It's the same reason why the racing community in GTA is alive to this day. Like, why the fuck would you race in GTA in your right mind? Like, you would have to be insane, right? Because the racing is subpar, mediocre at best. The cars are slow as hell. It's boring. But the reason why it's still like people still race competitively, like there's still racing events going on. People still do it because there's that community creation, aspect. You can make your own tracks. You can make fun tracks, and you can make fun tracks with car restrictions that are, car combo restrictions, which are good. That they compete against each other. They're like competitive. And with that like massive creator tool of creating your own gameplay, Rockstar has, subconsciously, unwantingly created like a sub community, like, it had to make sure the community has like something to keep going. Even though the entire game is shit, the community can create its own sort of gameplay, and that's why it's still alive. So it's a
I feel
perfect
like it's
example.
even
like,
more powerful because of the single player multiplayer mode, like 5M stuff. Like that makes GTA so like have almost infinite longevity. Like you
pretty
can
much.
create so much in 5M. It is unreal what people are doing, like in competitive racing servers, role play servers. Like GTA has something for pretty much everybody who likes to play video games.
Yeah. So like that sort of thing is really important that Deco like touched upon. It's like you need to have that aspect. If you don't have that, then you're really shooting yourself in the foot. I feel like
I would also
like, the
definitely
best-
argue I would play TC2 more if there was a solid structure of community creations and being able
Absolutely.
to like use the powerful track design, because like I think we talked about it earlier, like the props usage in the what was it, the spy update where you the stunt races.
Yeah, I
Like
know what you mean.
they made some
agency,
very
I
interesting.
think.
Yeah, the agency, they made some interesting like designs with how they
Yeah.
folded buildings and like made tracks like go up the side of buildings like in the cities. I thought it was a very interesting idea. They just never expanded on it or gave anybody the tools to make something like that and have like a super
exactly.
powerful track creator like that.
Exactly.
Like if you don't capitalize on it as a dev, like at least maybe give an opportunity for the community to make like a version of it themselves.
Yeah.
It's like making races with like those types of tools would be so extremely powerful, and like especially if you have a handling model that is actually enjoyable with it, which TC2 unfortunately kind of suffers with. You can like pretty much keep creating races indefinitely.
Exactly. That's exactly what happens even in GTA 5's, non-5M racing community. People are making tracks on their own, and they're making really good tracks and really good car combos, that just fit. And the good thing is because the cars also in GTA have a linear and even less than TC2, in terms of upgrading model. You have to like just learn the car. There's no fiddling. You don't have to worry about any fiddling, any tuning. You just learn the car, and that really, for me, it really like triggers the intent to mastery actually more, because it's like now it's like, okay, this car is set in stone the way it is. I can just learn this specific set, and that's just how it's gonna be. And once I master it, I know it's gonna be this way, and I'll be rewarded for it. I can utilize it. But with Forza, it's like, so, there's all sorts of different variables, and even if you master
Yeah.
it might not be the one. This might just be.
It's a
random
very
combo.
different way, like a different
Exactly.
approach to a game, I suppose.
Yeah, so like I guess like a racing game that I would love is like something like Forza, a bit more simplified, with maybe linear upgrading. So like cars are in their own respective classes makes sense. Maybe not have S1 or something. Maybe have like supercars class or something like that, and hypercars, that sort of. So something like TC2, with like linear upgrading, and so that cars are still the same. You can't just swap everything out, make it a completely different car. So you actually have to learn the car, and some more simplified stuff like removing stuff like dirty air, because let's be real, that nobody really enjoys it. It's the reason why nobody plays S2. Removing stuff like dirty air, making it a bit more simplified, but keeping the core physics the same, because the physics are nice. They're really like nice to play. It's the best thing we've got at the moment. So that sort of stuff, and then coupling it with just a more fleshed out map, something that's in between Forza and TC2, that size wise doesn't have to be TC2 size, just bigger, and like making like nice long balanced cross country tracks like Colossus and stuff, but also like having all the other in between, like the community created tracks, the shorter tracks, and the PvP system. So something with cars where cars are like their own entity that you can learn and have their own personality, and yeah, that sort of stuff.
Do
So-
you reckon that could be something that we can expect from Motorfest?
No.
Don't know, probably not.
Why
I just
not?
don't.
Because
do
I
not-
agree with you, but why not?
With Average Tower's track record, I just don't see anything happen. I see the Crew 2.5 coming.
Yeah. Here's the
I
thing.
am inclined to agree. Yeah.
Here's my like take on this too. Like I do not trust Ivory Tower to make a good handling model. I simply do not. Look at the Crew 2. How many years has it been since Blazing Shots, where the whole handling fuckery started, like the whole radical handling fuckery started?
Hot shots, dude. That's when it started.
Yeah, like Hot Shots started it, but at least Hot Shots, like the handling model, while being shit, was still similar. Like handling, old handling could still sort of compete. But like, how long? Let's say Hot Shots even. Let's say how long since Hot Shot, from the Lancer Evolution, the shitty Pista, the shitty Magma, those cars, till
Almost
this
2
day.
years.
4
How
years.
long has it been? 4 years. Throughout the 4 years, this studio has been incapable of delivering a single car that handles well.
Yep.
So with a track record like that, I do not expect them to make
So
TC2 good.
what we kind of
TC2
want
good.
is Motorfest, but made by Forza handling devs.
Yeah,
And
yeah, basically.
also giving community reasons and tools to make their own experience, because like the
Right.
biggest problems with like I guess like even if you like do have I don't know, like even if you do have better handling, like the problem with like the events and all the content in TC2 still remains. Like we just have that I guess bit of like spread out often how do you say it, like, well, we just have content which still doesn't even use the full extent of the map. Like we have those few preset experience scattered around which don't even account to like any visible direction. Like honestly, the game lost direction long ago. and we have no tools to fix it. Like Ivory Tower makes this, like Raven said, we do everything 50% experience, and there's nothing for the community to do about it.
Yeah, there's nothing for the community to do and further expand and make it actually the 100% complete experience that it would be.
Like we don't trust the devs themselves to expand on it anymore, and
Yeah.
we have no tools to do anything about it
Exactly.
ourselves. Sadly.
So like, I feel like something that just like, I feel like map design is also very underrated. By map design, I mean, you gotta be somebody who likes driving to understand what a good road network is. A good road network is a variety of different sorts of roads, all sorts of having like nice and engaging patterns of corners that are fun to drive through and having just a nice flow. And I feel like racing games mess that up big time. I feel like Forza actually does a good job, but Forza's map is fairly tiny, so you sort of run out of space very quickly. And this is going to be a very...
You actually end up kind of going to like kind of fatigue of racing over and over the same area over and over again. I feel that
exactly.
It's like you can spend
absolutely.
5 minutes. You can know the game, plop you down around the spot, spend 5 minutes driving on the road, and within those 5 minutes, you'll run across three tracks that you know.
Exactly. So that's why TC2 kept me going for so long, because New York, it's a half an hour race, or it's a 20-minute race. By the time you get from one point to the other, in the 20 minutes, like that other initial section feels fresh again because it's so long. And this is actually brings me perfectly to the point I was gonna get to. This is a slightly hot take, and this is my opinion. I feel like it's sad to let the current TC2 map go because it is so underutilized, and it's gonna be gone into history being underutilized, never fully utilized ever again.
Yeah,
it's gonna be sad.
I agree.
I feel that.
Think about it has more potential than any racing game that will ever come. Forza Horizon's map doesn't even touch TC2 in terms of potential. The amount of track potential we have. New York is just one type. New York is just, we got lucky and the devs happen to create a nice race. Like if you don't do the cuts on New York, if you do a no cuts run on New York, it's a very nice track layout. Imagine if the devs, or imagine if we had community tools that could create similar races, and for those who don't want to do 10,000 hour races, you could do server races. Like the entire upper range of the northern part of the map is so underused. There's so many beautiful tracks that you could use. And I'm gonna be real, I don't care what map comes in TCM. I feel like it's gonna be a downgrade because there's no way they're gonna hit the potential of TC2's map that the TC2's map has. And I feel like it's a tragedy that it's gonna go down in history, never being utilized.
I actually want to go even further and say that maybe TC1 was peak map.
Yeah, it was. Because, that's the same map, but TC1 actually, had it all fleshed out because no planes, XT.
Yeah.
This is something I also like to reflect upon. I don't think in hindsight it was a good idea to add all these planes, boats, cars, blah, 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 because the reality is they had a concept in mind initially, right? Which was a motorsports concept, right? The crew, it should have been called the Crew 2 Motor Nation. The Crew Motor Nation, right? Shouldn't have been called the Crew 2. Because it's not the Crew 2. It's not about, some gangster hood family, or some, bunch of criminals, racers that are taking over the underworld with racing. It's about...
I mean, if you want to be pedantic, it's just a different crew. It's you, Hero, Latrell, and whatever the off-road lady is
exactly.
called. And it's a different crew of people with a completely different mindset and a completely different team.
Yeah, but here's the thing: they never really expanded upon those. They were so casually put in. They weren't really so present throughout the game as TC1s.
No, it definitely feels. I mean, if you actually turn voices on, God forbid, you might hear their voices, but all of their lines are so insanely annoying that why would you turn voices on?
They're so forgettable, exactly, and so
I don't even know what the off-roader, the freestyle lady is called.
I don't even fucking know.
I think it's just,
So either
Sophia,
way, I think it's Sophia Tuck.
Yo, you're crazy.
Yeah.
Sophia Tuck. Sophia and Tuck is the off-road guy, and the other guys I don't know. Anyway, going back to the point, they had this whole thing plotted out, but then they just pull a complete 180. They pull a complete 180 and they say, we're going to make a Chinese bootleg copy of NFS and Forza, right? along, like they came up, they came up with this like, motorsports concept of planes, boats, cars, everything, which was a multi-discipline game, which I'm a huge fan of because I love vehicles in general, and I'm a huge plane guy, and I love cars, so for me it was like, wow, this is perfect. But then here's the thing: if you are going to make the ballsy move of turning your initial car game into such a thing, you gotta stick with the idea. You gotta get through it. You gotta push through the storm. But they didn't. They came out. All of the PS4 heads, everybody complained. Why is there planes in the game? Why is there boats in the game? Who needs this shit? Who wants this stuff? And they were like, well, damn, guess they must be right. So they went back on their own thing. And so they spent all these resources. Think about how much downgraded the map had to be done on the map for planes. Think about it. Think about all the textures that needed to be put on buildings or throughout the entire map. It's a huge map. It's a 5,000 square kilometer map, right? All the textures, all the building textures, all the stuff that they had to put and take away for planes to be able to be used on like a last gen toaster console to not die. And then you do all the sacrifice, and then you leave that content that you sacrificed everything for to rot.
They made it sacrifice and then never made it actually make sense because they immediately turned on it.
Exactly.
And here's the gist of it.
And that's the issue. Like they went and then they had no spine to stick to it. They did a complete 180, and then they just did what? They did an inferior version of Forza Horizon mixed with Need for Speed. Because let's be real, this was the only strength that TC2 had over its competitors. Forza Horizon wishes it had shit like monster trucks, planes, and Formula 1 cars. Need for Speed wishes it had that shit, right? Like race cars in an open world, such a big, large open world, right? But they were like, nah, we're gonna ignore that, We're gonna do one thing that these two other games do better than us in every way, and we're gonna just focus that. And that's what they did. They turned it essentially focusing only on the street race and hypercar aspects and like a bit on touring car, and just turning it into just like a fucking mobile version of Need for Speed / Forza Horizon. That's all it became.
I mean, touring car only was really once they began with the Speed Tour and
that's it.
Forsberg.
Exactly.
And before that, like even touring car was a forgotten discipline. Nobody touched it.
Exactly. So like all these disciplines that they had put so much effort into, so much time, spent so much time in developing, they just dropped completely. Like, what are you doing? Like from a game, it is the most stupid thing you can do from a game, resource point of view. Even if it's not being received well properly, you gotta stick to the game. It's like imagine a game of a completely different genre, because that's real. TC2 is not the same genre as this TC1 in my eyes. Like let's say if like a shooter game, is turning itself into something like a RPG, open world RPG, because that's what people want. Like you are completely just doing a 180 on your own vision, and you're shooting yourself in the foot, completely shooting yourself in the foot, and that's what they've done. And that was the death of the game in terms of its vision. They should have never done that because they never utilized that shit, and now they're just trying to utilize this, focus on this one part, and it's just inferior in every way to its competitors because they took away the one strength the game had. And that coupled with the fact that the map, I will cry. Like the fact that the map is never going to be utilized because it's the best map you've ever gotten in a game. TC1's map to this day, hands down, number one. And its potential is still untouched, and that it'll go down.
TC1 5M edition would be crazy.
Honestly, TC1 with TC2 physics system, just give it to me. I'll play it. That's the thing, so whatever Motor Nation I hope the map is good. That's my main thing, and I hope the handling is good. But I just don't trust that. I don't trust
the
developers.
Good base experience basically before they would go wild with swinging to all four sides with the community feedback. Before that, you should have at least some sort of a base game that can stand under that and be the base experience for everyone.
Exactly. They should have never ducked out of. They should have just kept the spine and not ducked out of their original vision.
Remember live extremes and the whole world bending stuff?
Yeah, what? Where is that even? Where the fuck is that even? That was the whole thing, the boats and shit like that, and now it's gone.
I thought they brought that somewhere back somewhere at some point. Like a new event actually got that, or was it just a new live extreme
It was
that?
a new
I think
live
it was
extreme.
Oh,
new
okay.
live
They got like
stream.
a winter special live extreme, I think, that they did
Oh, yeah.
later.
That was like what, year 2 for Christmas or some shit.
Might have been.
Yeah, I think it was
on
Christmas or something.
You know what's the saddest shit? Like you can even drive on the bends if you bug
Yeah.
out the transition. Like Oz recently posted a clip of driving on the bends. Like it was actually possible to expand on it so much more because the map doesn't stop being playable once it bends.
Yeah, like
It's
they
actually
had
like a
this.
graphics card thing, like just a graphics thing, I think.
Yeah.
It's very easy
I would
to
still imagine that
manipulate
it
that.
needs some work, like to make it actually, coherent.
Yeah, it's just I feel like TC2 is the definition of untapped potential. Like the
Man,
map they
remember
had.
the intro race, which
Yeah,
we cannot even
like
redo?
they had so much things, and if they just had stuck to that theme with the playground they had, they could have had something great. But they didn't use it. They were like, no, we're gonna do inferior clone of Forza slash NFS. We're gonna do street racing in our game that has fucking planes, monster trucks, bikes, Formula One cars, race cars, shit like that. And we're gonna do street racing, what every other fucking
Yeah.
thing is doing, better than us.
And
in
even
fact.
that street racing over the time would get downgraded. Like look at
Exactly.
the tracks like Coral Gables, where you
Yeah.
go through like a partially built building, which makes like a natural ramp, makes you a new route. Then you still have
like Everglades.
other tracks like
Everglades.
LA tracks, and then Coconut Grove, as well as around the Miami and Gables stuff as well.
Yeah.
Like you have so many. Oh, even like the cursed strip south. Like if you would look at that, it has like
Yeah, no,
those
it had a
classic
lot of-
arcade game like
Yeah.
elements, like going around that small Eiffel Tower and stuff.
The track design was pretty fire, always in street race.
Yeah,
but then
and then
like,
you
stuff
just
like,
have point slapped to the desert after that.
I think
yeah,
it's
just
kind of
like-
misinterpreted the community feedback, because even I myself was like, maybe some sprints would be interesting. And then
And
for the
then they were
entire
like-
year after that, the only thing they released was like point-to-point sprint races. I'm like, okay, but not this much. Like, chill.
Yeah, exactly.
And also
like,
they
just
barely
a
ever did
couple,
like
like-
any interesting integrations of like the elevation, maybe some custom props. Like they could totally do that, as they've shown in some later events, like those agency events. The most recent season, like they did. Like the custom work they did on some of the events, like making new tunnels for one of the events, or
Yeah.
all of those like wooden things like around the farms, type of shit, or just like general like destroyed shit like around. Like they could at least have some theme, like a vibe to the races, but instead like on those sprints, on that wave of street race expansion, it was just A to B,
Emptiness.
slap that,
Yep.
that's it.
Yeah, like that's just it just goes to show like that that just makes it more tragic, like you have all these extra nice sections on the map and you never use them and you do shit like that. Like I don't know. There's some area in this where I feel like the developers just they don't really care. They have no care about how the race is gonna look, how it's gonna play out.
Or they don't have
feel like-
time.
Yeah, I feel like in TC1 they actually had a lot more care put into like how the tracks are gonna play. Unfortunately, TC1 was plagued by its horrendous, non-existent physics, but the cars were still at least responsive compared to now. At least we had that.
I guess that's another pitfall which TCM needs to avoid. Like, even if they do have like some sort of a nice-ish base experience, like if they are going to make it another live game, like, please, even if you release less content, make it at least count instead of just the most effortless type of stuff.
Exactly. Like just that's what they. I don't know.
Like it needs to be closer to the base game quality. Like
Exactly. Like I have very high.
people want like more of that base stuff, but instead you give them a halfway version of it, and
Yeah.
it's just not going to work again, I think.
I have very low hopes for TCM. I don't know. I feel like because like as Fedra said, as Deco said, as you said, like with their track record, man, it's I don't expect any good handling.
Yeah, it's hard
And
to have hopes when you spent the past like 4 years wishing for TC2 to be something that it just never ended up being.
it could have very easily been.
What's strange to me though is how it's actually perceived outside of like people actually do love racing games. I've actually seen a couple of articles saying, "Oh, the Crew 2 has like aged well and has become one of the best racing games." I'm thinking to myself, what? How?
What?
Well,
How?
sometimes I have seen those opinions from people who literally didn't even play TC2.
Yeah,
That's the only thing which makes them say that. They just didn't even experience it to say that stuff.
Or it's people who like cruise at like 10 kilometers per hour, so they don't even feel the car. They're like, man, this is an insane game. I put 1 hour into this best game. Well, I don't know why. I don't know why everybody else is saying. You know, I don't know. This is very hard. Like, here's the thing to me. Like TCM, like the handling is crucial. If the handling is bad, the game is bad. I'm sorry. Like, look at TC1. TC1 was such a beautiful game, but because it was like like the handling was the way it was, it just a lot of us just like outside of being like casual gameplay was, which I still enjoyed a lot, but outside of that, like because the way the handling was, like it was just it held it back. The moment that your handling sucks in a racing game, it's over because it's the number one component you interact with, right? It is something you interact with the driving game 24/7. It's the main component you would interact with when you're driving, whether you're doing a mission, whether you're cruising, whether you're doing a race, whether you're doing a tutorial. You're interacting with the physics system of the game. If the physics system in a vehicle game, in a vehicle-based game, is bad, the game is bad because it's the main component. If you are interacting with the main component that's bad, it's frustrating to deal with. The game is going to be frustrating to deal with. Then it doesn't matter. Everything else doesn't matter, And then the second is the map. If these two things can be made well, then we'll see about the rest. But I don't know.
I guess to condense like the entire things which we said about TC2 and how that makes up my expectations for TCM. Like I'm having the expectations very low, like GeForce said, that the hopes are really low, and basically the main thing which they gotta do is just prove us wrong on the expectations. Like,
yeah, I hope they prove us wrong.
Start actually. I guess untying all of those like interconnected issues which they always struggled with on the TC1 and TC2. And
Yeah.
again, just prove us wrong that we are so like I guess disenchanted now with like what they can do. Like we just don't
Yeah.
believe in the magic anymore that they can pull it off. Like start proving us wrong
Like,
on that.
the reason I still liked TC2 and I put so many hours into it initially, like it got me hooked. I was playing it every day, is because like when the game came out, okay, the map was it wasn't as pretty anymore as it used to be, but it was still that map. It still had that beautiful road network that TC1 had, that infinite potential. All of the roads. The map was still pretty much the same. So that was still that
In
nice.
fact,
map
I think
that
the
was-
cities were improved.
Yeah, the cities were
Sure.
improved. Exactly. So like it was still like
was
it was
improved in my opinion still.
yeah, the handling, of course, like that's what I was gonna get to, is like that's what got me interested again. It's like it had a great map, TC1's map. So I was like, okay, this they couldn't go wrong. I already knew how good the TC1 map was, and the handling was better, and that's the number one thing. Launch day TC2 handling, despite all of its flaws, people criticize it. Oh, it's drift to win, blah blah blah, this that. It's not my sim, it's not my realistic. It doesn't make sense. But let's be real. When we all played during launch day, the handling it all made sense to us.
Yeah.
It was intuitive. We all knew what we were doing. After a while, like when we started playing, when we started PvP, we knew how the cars reacted. We knew what they were doing. We knew how to extract with what we wanted with them, and we knew how to guide them to the line we wanted to. We were under control, not just with fucking cars, with planes, with boats. We all knew what we were doing with those specific disciplines, and they all felt fun to play. And that's what ended up getting me to play for so long. And over the time, that just got downgraded.
It actually started for me with Gamescom. I was at Gamescom when they had the game there on show. I got to play like the little intro bit, like with the Porsche transforming to the plane and the boat.
Yeah.
And like immediately there, I felt like, wow, this game already feels like there's so much weight to these vehicles. Like this handling is so much more
Yeah.
in depth than TC1 ever
It
was.
actually
Like
feels like you're driving a car.
Yeah,
Exactly.
this
Like, it
has
felt like
so
I was
much
driving a
potential.
car.
That's what I thought back then. And then
And that's-
it
yeah.
was that I enjoyed TC2 for like the first, I want to say, year. And that's when Hot Shots came around about. And it's like that's when we got the Land
Beta
Vivo
shit.
10. It was like,
Yeah.
why this car is so frustrating to drive? Like,
Exactly.
why?
And like that's around where the thing was like it was just that's what was so nice about the game. And they actually did get the physics, like despite not being perfect, they got it, they hit the things right. They hit the controllability, you know, and the intuitiveness and the fact that they felt natural. They hit those spots right. So even though the physics were, you know, arcadey, they didn't necessarily make sense, they were good in that sense. And the planes, to my shock, were amazing. The plane physics were right. I was like, holy shit, this is great. Because like I'm somebody who's I rant about plane physics a lot when I play shit like Ace Combat. When I play Ace Combat, I'm like, what the fuck? I can write 100 different novels of why this plane is bad. What is this shit? Why is it doing what it is doing? It has no weight. It has no weight. Oh my god! It's what the fuck? I'm going Mach 3 plus in the vertical. What is this? You know, like, and when I played TC2, I was like, holy shit. They actually got planes nice. They actually know how to make an arcade plane handling. This is actually good. I'm actually enjoying this. You know?
That last part, I'm actually enjoying this.
Exactly.
That is so important.
And it's funny because
it's gone now. I don't enjoy TC2.
Because like, you know, I come from GTA. I competitively dogfight in GTA. I used to. And there was another friend of mine who he didn't just play competitively in GTA. He played in SAMP, San Andreas Multiplayer. He's been playing that. He was playing that for 6 years. He's still playing it to this day, and he played GTA. And he was even more finicky about physics than me. Like he would rant even more, and he enjoyed it. And that was the first time I saw him outside of like another game that wasn't like based on either realism or like GTA based physics, and like say this is actually enjoyable. In fact, we both synonymously agreed that, holy shit, dude, this is better than GTA. We would play this more than GTA planes. Like, we were enjoying it more. We were like, we actually wished, like, holy shit, imagine if they had, like, a dogfighting mode in this. Like, we could dogfight with this. That would be so much cooler than GTA. And
did you guys actually see, like, the little in-game video trailer with the paintball guns?
Yeah, the paintball. It's even in the bindings file in the documents.
Yeah.
Which is another thing which, like, if you are not willing to create events for that, give the damn event creator.
Which is a shame, because then that way nobody would have hated the Pilatus. Because if you know anything about dogfighting, the Pilatus would have been god. The AOA, the angle of attack that Pilatus can get, you can turn around in an instant. That motherfucker would have dominated the paintball thing. It would have been the meta. It would have been the ultimate. It would have been the meme king. Like it would, like the other planes would be racing meta, but the Pilatus would be the paintball god. Like it would be the ultimate dogfighting tryhard plane. So like that would be insane. So like we were just really enjoying it, and then like they just downgraded everything, and it was like, well, yeah, it's where we are now. So like the release date, like TC2 had all the right spots. It did hit all the right spots, and that's why we all played it. I feel like at least that's why I played so many thousands upon thousands of hours. And then as it slowly started, like, you know, getting downgraded, I was still had love for the game. You know, I put all these hours into it, so like I was still like, you know, I still wanted the game to be good. But at last, you know, my copium supply ran out.
Keeping up on that copium for far too long until you realize that it's way too late for the game to ever realize the potential again.
Exactly.
Which again, like, yeah, with TCM now, that's like whenever they are going to be announcing the release date, that's going to be the hard cutoff for the potential of TC2. Like, being never realized, I think the
I feel it's already
going to be cut.
I feel like
less.
that cutoff has already passed, because the announcement of TCM being in the works confirmed that they are no longer working on TC2 with their full developer workforce.
Yeah.
And they haven't
it
been
is
for a
visible
while.
on the game, sadly.
Yeah.
It is very visible with like the scuffed offsets on car, the ride heights, like randomly
that's
changing
like
to the opposite side when you
a
upgrade the
very
car and stuff.
extreme thing, yeah.
Yeah. And also like
that leads into something I wanted to talk about was you guys all love the beginning of the game, and
Yep.
I feel like that's where all the care was when for developers.
Yes,
Like they cared
absolutely.
about what the game meant to the players, and nowadays since they have practically a skeleton team working on the game, that they got people that just don't give a shit. Like it really shows when you release a car that's originally like they kept the drivetrains consistent for just about all the
for
cars.
the longest time.
Yeah.
For the longest time.
Like
Yeah.
all the drivetrains are consistent with what the real world counterpart was, until I think what the most recent one was the fucking Countach, right? That's real world drive. That's real world drive IRL, but now it's
Same issue for the FTO. Both of those cars are all-wheel drive for some reason in the game.
Not just that, like the speed ranges, you know, every car, even in hypercar, had a set speed range, right? They had set speed ranges. They would be playing within these speed ranges based on the rear-wheel drive or all-wheel drive. And then along come the Mitsubishi 3000 GT No Rules Edition, 470 kph.
I think it's oversight.
And they have like the example of going the other way around too. Like they have that Saline which goes 100 km/h slower than the 3000 GT in the same class.
Like here's the thing, like it's like, remember like how in TC1 the perf Agera was nerfed because it would toxic would be too high.
Yeah.
You know, I feel like they actually like thought about it. I was like, well, fuck, if this car goes like 440 and every other car struggles to get to 380, you know, would be sort of unbalanced, right? So like they sort of checked that, and now like they should release shit like 300 Chiron 300 plus. Oh, it goes 500. Let's just let it go to 500 without engine. Oh, let's also give it the same NOS power as the LVN and the same grip as the LVN, because
it's basically a normal top tier car until 420, 440-ish, and then it suddenly gets that second wind to give it absolutely no downside, and then on top of it gain the biggest upside possible, like just being beyond that class restriction.
Yeah, and 500 is with much shortened gearbox. It goes to 530 or something with unlocked gearbox. Like that just shows to show that they genuinely don't care anymore. They just simply do not
I feel
care.
like even if you want to widen the range of your vehicles like that, it's possible, but there need to be downsides, and the 300 Plus doesn't have downsides.
Exactly, like the 300 Plus should have no NOS power, no NOS. It shouldn't have that much NOS. It should have like LaFerrari tier NOS at best. And even then it would be top tier, regardless.
And it shouldn't handle the corners as good as a Zonda.
Exactly,
does.
it should either not have
handle like a Chiron, not like a Devo.
Exactly, it should handle less than the Chiron, because the Chiron still has like, you know, like it has more down. It would have more downforce, and it would be a draggier car. Whereas with the 300 Plus, they made it even more streamlined, even like less downforce, make it slippery. So it should feel way more loose, way less grip, in the corners. So it should be like the slower cornering cars, and not like the fucking handle like an LVN, fucking have the power of
Even LVN shouldn't handle like that though.
Yeah, no, LVN shouldn't handle. The fact that it handles the way it does, and then you have the Jesko. The Jesko just. You turn and then it hits a brick wall, and it's like, okay, I stop now. And then there's the fact,
balancing big sound.
And then there's the fact that the Jesko and the CX-75 have a broken power curve for like how many years now?
Literally since introduction, so 4 years probably.
And Jesko having absolutely no handling to top it off. A
Nothing,
track
literally
built
nothing.
Koenigsegg, by the way.
Yeah. I feel like with the Jesko, they also just generally didn't put enough effort, because like if you look at all the cars, right, like the GT3 RS, the 918, they all have their four-wheel steering model. In fact, one of the Porsches, if I recall correctly, I vividly remember this, actually got their four-wheel steering updated later down the line in the game. They realized they didn't have it modeled, and so they actually modeled it.
I think it was the GT3 RS.
Yeah, the GT3 RS.
And then have it functioning, it just didn't have a visual model of it. I think.
So like even the Renault Megane had a four-wheel steering, and then you felt them. The 918, you feel it when the four-wheel steering kicks in. The Jesko in real life has four-wheel steering, but it doesn't work in TC2. It doesn't even have it modeled, and it has none. And it probably makes sense. It probably makes sense why the car hits a brick wall, because they probably took they mimic like real life traction peak model, like the way the traction curve goes around the corner. And because like the real traction model is obviously based on downforce and the fact that it has rear wheels turning, in TC2 it doesn't, so it just hits a brick wall and then it just stops there, because it's waiting for the four-wheel steering to kick in, but nothing happens. And yeah, even the TDF has like the 4-wheel steering model, but yeah. And if you look at the TDF, it has insane cornering. The TDF is nutty cornering. It is cracked on corners. So yeah, it's just, I don't know. There's somewhere they fucked up.
They just lost the care. I think they just lost the
Yeah.
people that really cared about the real life aspects of each car.
Another thing that I feel like was a downside was to show just how spineless some of these developers, like some of these, like at least heads were. I feel like to show like just how easily like they were swayed by the most stupid people. Is you guys remember the Regera incident? You remember that? You guys-
The exhaust placement.
Yeah, so initially their exhaust placement was in the right spot. People complained, people who had no idea how the car worked. And after the beta, when the game came out, they fucking put it in the middle, the exhaust. And then people like told them and they said, well, no, they're actually in the right spot. You made it wrong again. I had to change it again.
I wanted to say that's NDA, but actually, I think the 5 years of the NDA might have passed by now. I think that's actually
The
what you
beta
need
was
to talk
public,
about.
remember? The beta
Is that a
was
public beta? Okay, because I don't even
Yeah, the beta was public.
remember.
The beta was public.
There was an open
Anyway.
beta, yeah, and there was
Yeah.
one for the pre-order.
But I don't remember if it was correct in the open beta or the closed.
No, it was in the open beta. It was right. Like the car had the right spots. It had in the right exhaust. And then in launch day, like when the game came out, they fucking put it in the center exhaust. So like, just goes to show like how they just listen to something without even considering like, hold up, is this even like, does it even make sense? And they should have the right data, right? Because they literally took the car from Koenigsegg. Like Koenigsegg literally gave them the permission to use the model. How can you not see it, especially if you're the one who's designing the thing? That just goes to show how malleable they were as a design studio, or as a game studio, like taking the feedback from somebody that honestly clearly has no is wrong about the thing they're talking about, and they don't even begin to do the research. And I feel like that's what has happened also with all other aspects of the game. Just casuals, randoms that like are just, they play the game for 1 hour. They have they haven't even played the game much. They come in and start talking, and they hear the majorities talking about something, and they just do a complete 180.
I feel that's what prompted the handling change to begin with. People bought the game at launch and didn't know how to cope with it, and then they complained, and then they left the game, and then Ivory Tower decided, for no real reason, to change the handling model.
Yeah, and they changed it for fucking everything, if you remember. Not just, literally, value rate got changed too. Value rate got changed way back in the day. Way back then, during a hovercraft update, Gator Rush. Rally rate got changed, rallycross got changed, hot shots, street race, hypercar, touring car, boats. But boats only got the speed glitch fixed with the weight redistribution.
No.
Alpha GP, fucking jet sprint, you name it. They changed it, So
and not for the better either.
Exactly, like any sensible game director, any sensible person, they would have looked at this and they would be like, all right, guys, this is just not worth the man hours. It's clearly serviceable, Our handling model is usable. Or like the fact that the Regera's exhaust is in the right fucking spot. Let's not change it. No. Let's just change it. I'm trying to question, like, how can you be so dumb? How can you be so clueless? Literally, you acquired the car. And you listen to somebody who has no idea, and you change it. You listen to it, and you take their feedback.
I feel that it's just a disconnect between the different teams inside a company. I feel like the company has gotten to a size where communication between departments just doesn't function anymore.
Like, that's there's something wrong going on with an Ivory Tower, like that just prompts these changes which nobody has asked for. Okay, people complained about the car handling. Why was jet sprint changed? Why were planes changed? Nobody asked for that.
People complained about jet sprint a lot, that they couldn't control the boats, and they still can't, so nothing changed.
It was like the one discipline where you actually had like, I guess the closest steering to actual like linearity, being absolute. Like you would move the stick, and it would feel like the boat would basically follow your stick.
And that's exactly what a jet sprint boat does in real life. Like the boat is literally just an engine in a bathtub.
Yeah, literally.
And you point to the thruster, because it's not even like a rudder; it's a thruster.
Yeah.
And that's where the boat goes, because you're steering an engine, a floating engine. That's what you're using. So yes, the thing reacts instantaneously.
Yeah. But yeah, that's just something that people just didn't understand, and
But
it's
like
such a
people
fucking shame.
struggled with it. I mean, fair that you struggle with it, but cope,
But
skill
get
issue maybe.
better.
Like,
Yeah.
and then they changed it, and people still don't know how to use it because they didn't change it for the better. They
No, the
didn't make
best.
anything more usable. They just made it harder to
Yep.
use for the people that were actually good at it, and they made it still impossible for the people that lacked the skill to use the boat anyways. So nothing improved.
I feel like that what you just said can be applied to just about any other handling change. Street race,
Yep.
exactly. They made it harder for people that knew how to deal with it, and people who didn't know how to drive in the first place died even harder. remember PvP lobbies after Inner Drive. We used to DNF randoms regularly because they just
Yeah.
didn't understand.
And I
how to
still
drive.
remember how all the randoms would be like, with that new handling, a lot of randoms for a while would just shake on straights. Like they would literally not understand
Yeah.
what their cars are doing anymore.
They wouldn't be able to keep it steady. They would just like body roll and shake off. Remember, dude, fucking Big Land, people were dying.
Yeah.
on the fucking
Yeah.
crest.
Even though it
People would
became
die
like
on
the
Big Land.
easiest ever, people would die like all the same.
Like shit was too real, dude. Like, no, this just goes to show. Like GeForce made a perfect point. Like they made it harder for people who already knew, and they didn't figure. The people who never knew, they were still the same anyway.
That's fine. I remember Big Land being actually a little difficult at really high speeds, and then Inner Drive came around, and then all of a sudden I was like, "Damn, what is going on? This is like super brain dead easy now."
Novak
and
actually
yet
makes an
people
interesting
struggle.
point in chat that for him Inner Drive was fine, but I think the key takeaway there is wheel.
Yeah,
You
like,
never had to struggle with the problem of, having to fight your controller. Fine, it's like you were clearly weren't used to old TC2 then.
yeah, like you clearly either you didn't push enough at the time when you came along in Inner Drive, and when you started pushing, you were on wheel. But like if you talk to any guys who were competitive before the handling, like super competitive, and they were playing, and you talk about and you saw their views on Inner Drive, you will see like they were just held back. Like slow steering, which you played the majority on wheel, right? Even after controller, you played the majority on wheel. You are not affected by the main issue of the handling, which is slow steering. You're not affected. You literally have one-to-one response.
Like, yeah, if you play on wheel, like the only difference you're gonna notice is the vehicles have more grip. Then yeah, if you're not a high tier player, then the only thing you're gonna see is a positive because you're setting faster times.
Yeah.
And especially if everybody else is being slowed down, then yeah, in comparison, your times will shoot up the leaderboards. So you think
Yeah.
you're having a great time.
But sadly, it only increased the disparity between the skill levels in reality, because you gotta do like the dumb levels of precise shit to be anywhere near the top.
Pretty much.
I feel like
I had to remember like precise steering ranges for each type of a car.
Every person had to do that. Yeah. Go on further.
I feel like this
Yeah.
leads into like an issue with a lot of games nowadays is like that devs being weirdly headstrong about making changes after the fact that they already made a change.
Like they are unable to seem to go back on the change, which is just weird.
I mean,
think,
at that
like,
point,
as
that's like
soon as
the
something is
sunk
pronounced
cost
competitive,
fallacy
that
thing,
happens.
right?
I suppose so, but like I remember, like even with Rockstar, right? Like, or there was a time where Rockstar were making new cars with this like stupid handling flags that nobody liked. The suspension flags are all weird and the
Oh
grip
god, yeah.
weird, and everybody was like, "Fuck this! This is bad." And they were like, "Okay, fine." You know, they might not have changed those cars, but like at least they were like, "Okay, all other cars are not gonna have this shit." If only
Didn't they recently release more cars with that though?
Yeah, they did, which I don't understand. If only, remember when Hot Shots with the Lancer Evolution X and the Magma, when they came out, if only Iritara was like, okay, they don't like it, let's just not release anymore.
Because people did like it because the cars were fast.
It's just only the Lancer was faster though. Nobody could even drive the Magma. People were dying left and right with the Magma. Only the Lancer was fast.
Yeah, but they did change the Magma, right?
Only blazing shots. That's when the thing became meta. Before blazing shots, that thing was literally borderline undrivable. Everybody was dying collectively. And like the only car that was faster on the beta handling was the Lancer Evolution X. Not just because it had more grip, the Evo had ridiculous levels of power, if you remember. It had insane NOS, and it was all-wheel drive, so obviously it was gonna be meta.
I think they were just way too fixated on making the game cope with the change. Like they decided that that change absolutely has to happen, and then
Yeah.
like you remember the situation where like with the first wipes of the leaderboards, they
Yeah.
were not as quick to happen. They really struggled to make even one wipe in the beginning. And I think that's where the part of everything being ridiculously fast comes from. Like they just make it so fast that the old leaderboards don't even matter, and they need wiping in some cases because of that.
Yeah, it feels
And
yeah.
they failed to recognize that because of that speed, like people got biased into thinking that faster,
Yeah, I'm
automatically
having a
better.
better time. I'm clearly faster. I'm so much faster on this handling model. I feel like another thing that makes people think the handling model was better, especially on wheel, is that old handling, because it was limited by grip on wheel, it was very easy to like slide out too much, oversteer, because you had so much steering authority. You had excess amounts of steering authority on wheel on old handling because you didn't need that much. The cars were grip limited, right? Steering was never the limit. But on the new handling, all of a sudden, all these even casuals who would like just drift way too much, just like oversteer or like understeer too much. All of a sudden, the cars, because they were on rails, they were literally like trains on rails. All of a sudden, especially for a wheel user, you're no longer drifting out. You're being very precise, and like, because the handling model is so dumbed down and simple, if you're on a wheel, since you have one-to-one steering, you just point where the car is going, and it's like a laser. You have like laser precision.
Jet
So
sprint
of
on
course you
both,
think of course you think you're fast now.
or it's like driving jet sprint on land. Smile.
Yeah, yeah. You literally just point the car. It's like car. Turns where you previously had to like brake and like precisely and get the car into the right drift and then make sure you get around the corner right. Now that you had so much grip on wheel, if you were on wheel, you could just point the car and this like just goes full throttle, full beans.
Well, sadly, that's just TC2 with all those like interconnected issues. It's a
Yeah.
game broken beyond repair that's never going to realize its potential, and they are clearly pouring resources into the other game which they just announced. And I guess the main thing the new game needs to achieve is to make it worth it in at least some shape or form. Like
I
have
hope
like
they do
a
that.
solid base experience with some spine behind it, as we said. That's the devs just clearly didn't have it in some moments. Then with
I
the
feel like it was
whole
during all
competitive
moments, dude.
stuff, you gotta have some sort of filter on the feedback, and recognize the causes of stuff correctly instead of just
Yeah.
fast good. And if we speak of the live service, the game needs to do not make it a live service for the sake of the live service, solely to keeping attention in, and it needs to instead actually, coherently continue the game, improve it and expand on it instead of just randomly firing like the TC2 did.
Yeah.
I feel like the randomly firing, like in all of the aspects, is one of the biggest problems of the TC2. Like, whatever issue you bring up, like it feels like just randomly, just picking something to address, not even going like deep into the problem, like not understanding the cause and what's the cause, what's the result, like mixing up everything and just firing whatever at the game. Because it's a live service, we can adjust it later, blah blah blah, and it never
Yeah.
gets to a point of being a coherent game because of it.
It's just I wish TC2 I wish they just didn't take some of the decisions that they took. Another classic decision is, remember when the super glue walls happened on the
Oh, God,
Demolition
yeah.
Derby update,
Yeah.
and it was hilarious in PvP because like on high speed tracks, people who would tap the wall once, it was gone. They
It
were
was
out of slip.
arguably absolute peak of skill and PvP
Yeah.
because
Exactly.
like people
Like-
who are like barely keeping up with slip in the current meta, like they just wouldn't be keeping up because they would be way too afraid to hang on to that speed.
Not just that, like tracks. There were tracks like Mother Road 66 on old handling, like there were they were actually like, which were considered to be rather boring. All of a sudden they became very intense because it was like, okay, I make one, I touched that wall once, I'm gone, Whereas now it's like, people can overspeed with slipstream into walls and they can be fine. Slipstream will carry them back, which didn't used to be the case back in the day. And that was also when, like, in my eyes, the best New York run ever happened, which was IMAX's Bugatti Chiron New York run on old handling with the super glue walls. That shit will be unbeatable. It's perfection. It's the most pushed New York run you can get, and it doesn't get any better than that. And like that was like peak skill ceiling for TC2. I feel like that's where like the game was around its peak in terms of skill ceiling, but people hated it so much, and they were like, okay, fine, we're gonna change it back. So clearly they do listen to something, but they listen to just the wrong crowd for some reason. Like they just listen to people like. I feel like it's the PlayStation community after all, because that's their main user base. So they're like, okay, well, people don't like it, so we're gonna remove it. So yeah.
That is interesting though, because that is one of the few things they did actually backtrack a decision they made. They listened to feedback. The wall riding is crazy. Fix it. They made a decision to, change the wall riding behavior, and then they backtracked it.
Yeah. They clearly can backtrack, but for some reason, other things they just don't.
I get a
also
loss of
something they
spine
backtracked.
moment. A loss of spine.
Yeah.
Well, I think at this point we are basically going in circles.
Yeah.
The same issue of
We've already
just
come to a
TC2
conclusion.
never really realizing itself and just struggling.
Pretty much.
I mean, we briefly talked about TCM expectations low.
Yeah, I guess you guys could formulate yours a little bit more as well, because I said mine already.
I mean, we've already
I think there's not really much to talk about yet.
It's
And
just
speaking of not much to talk about, I wanted to ask, like, do we expect anything from Solar Crown?
no,
Because there is nothing yet.
you can't even see anything yet, so I don't trust them already. Like
the team made the WRC stuff, right?
yeah,
I feel like putting a lot of emphasis on the team did this, the team did that. I feel like that's not a good metric to go off of, because like Back for Blood was made by the guys that did Left 4 Dead originally. That game's kind of bad nowadays.
Yeah.
Fair enough. I mean, like
speaking of that,
we based TCM's expectations off what TC2 is, right? So that's what I was going off.
But
yeah, WRC is just a very different type of game than TDU will be. So
there's a little thing about it, about like the devs in TC2. It's not even the same studio anymore. And it could probably be part of why TC2 is so abandoned, that to potentially work on that new game. Ivory Tower, like I think they even moved they expanded a lot with like the fancy headquarters and stuff.
Mhm.
Like it's not even the same studio technically anymore. Like Fergus is still calling the shots, but like even like with people who we interact with in the community, like the change in the personnel is a lot.
is Fergus really still calling the shots? I haven't really seen
You
it.
could see him in the
He was in
TCM
the
videos if you
TCM
really
video,
pay attention.
Oh.
Same with Sufyan. That's another OG from TC1 days, I think.
Yeah. And that's like basically the two faces I hang on to now, because like everyone else is like sort of kind of gone.
Yeah.
So like with TCM,
Rest in peace, James.
I don't know.
I mean, what?
Like, it's like a different studio making it basically for me now, and I guess that gives like, some hope in terms of like the change is going to happen like regardless, simply because like so many more people are working on it now and so many people changed.
I feel
I
like
definitely think they
I don't know
changed
if it's for
handling,
the
guys.
better.
Yeah, I feel like the one dev I miss the most is the OG handling guy. The guy
whoever
who's
made
there.
that, he knew what he was doing, and whatever
He
changed.
was like peak, and
know.
then they were like, yo, change this shit. And he was like, I don't know, you guys don't know shit. I'm done.
That's our conspiracy, though.
Yeah, that's our conspiracy. Because there's no way that guy who made Launch Day Handling made all this. This just, you can't, no. Cannot be.
Well,
Yeah, I think pretty much like after half a year, the game was feeling like experimental in terms of the handling. It
Yeah.
didn't really feel like it was the same.
That's
handling
my
anymore.
that's also that's another thing actually. We probably didn't really we sort of touched on, but not really. Is that the way the game was treated as an early access / open beta the whole throughout the majority of its lifespan? I take so much issue with that. I'm literally seething, molding, coping over it because that should
Imagine if the same
not be a
happens in
thing.
TCM.
That should not be a thing. We paid full price for this AAA game, and they're treating it like some experimentation beta build that you can just like swap handling models around it and shit like that. And nobody seems to be taking issues with that. Nobody. None of the casuals. Nobody seems to be talking. Everybody seems to be, this is great. Game's in a great spot. New updates. Like, dude.
I mean, like if they see the handling changes as improvements, I guess they can see it as higher value for the money they put in, right?
But do they though?
I think you could
I don't
apply
know,
that
I'm not a
to.
casual.
I think you could apply that to any other live service game. I mean, Destiny came out, live service game. Years later, now has all this other content, but no, is it really actually content? Same thing with TC2.
I mean,
Yeah.
if we look at like the OG live service game, right? It's like World of Warcraft or some shit.
Yeah.
Like that is still, the way that live content works. Like there is a new season and there's like a new map or whatever, and that's how they do it, right?
Yeah.
And
No, my issue with the game is that they're treating it in the like an open beta. They're changing the core of a racing game, which is
Exactly.
handling and physics. Right? They're literally ripping the core out and putting a new thing in. They're basically making a new type of game at that point. But in other live service games, they don't rip out the core shooting. They don't. In Destiny, they didn't rip out the core shooting mechanics and turn it to CS:GO recoil control and shit like.
Yeah, I
shit
think
like
in that department we like shot past even all of the esports titles. Like even though like the balance changes and shit sometimes feel very unnecessary there, and like a change for the sake
Yeah,
of change
but
and
they,
stuff.
at least the
Like they
core
don't rip out
gameplay.
the base gameplay. Yeah.
Exactly. Like, Destiny didn't change itself from, Destiny to Counter-Strike or Titanfall 2 all of a sudden from a shooter point, But that's what happened to TC2. We went from a completely different physics system to a completely different physics system in every fucking, discipline. And that's what I take issue with. Because that's something you do in, like, an alpha state game. But they're doing this to a live game, and people are accepting it and okay with it. And I found it absurd. Like, how can you find this acceptable? Like, the game is already out at this point. You should have some sort of, because it also, to me, it also shows incompetence from the developer side of you, because that it shows that you're clearly not confident in your own skills, and you have to experiment so far down the game's line, which is funny because the game was in a better state on launch. In fact, it was more complete on launch than most other games, but like it actually became more incomplete
Yeah,
as we progressed.
They just needed to continue expanding and like
On all
placing
fronts,
quality
yeah.
events around the map,
Exactly,
if you do wanna make big changes like they did with adding PvP, and then you could continue expanding on that, then add community content with track
not just
creation
that, but
and stuff. Like there are meaningful ways to a live service game.
expand on all areas. Don't just expand on street race or hypercar. If you want to add PvP, add PvP for touring car, alpha GP, non-contact PvP. Make those disciplines part of the main thing as well. But like the fact that PvP was only restricted to like street race and hypercar and bikes is also like stupid in my opinion. That should have never happened. And then there was like the mixed PvP, which nobody played because it was collisions, and nobody fucking liked collisions because who likes collisions? They should have made touring car, hypercar, street race, alpha GP. They should have made it all in, or even jet sprint, all in one setting. On non-contact, all in one go. Sort of like TC1 did with its disciplines. All disciplines were played in TC1.
Yeah.
But the fact that they split it is that even split the disciplines even from the dedicated community. Nobody played those other disciplines because like in PvP they weren't there. So why would you play them? So that was really like also something like expand the game as a live service on all fronts and don't change the core gameplay for the love of God. Like why would you do that?
I still wonder like what happened to Air Race to the point of it not being viable to even add in rotating playlists. Like you can play it in co-op just fine, but it never made it to the PvP.
Yeah, I guess because of the way Air Race works, it's a time trial, IRL too. That's just how it works. I feel like Air Race in general wouldn't be very interesting. Outside, like if you know your like subtleties, sure. But I feel like Jet Sprint makes for better racing. Yeah, that's you could flex the skill, but
such a
I feel
power
like
fantasy.
I feel like Jet Sprint makes for far better racing because there's how do I explain this? It's a lot more complex. Air Race is very subtle, right? It's very, very subtle. Like,
Bro, my wake.
but like Jet Sprint, Rallyway, touring car, especially touring car in Alpha GP and Rallycross, especially like why is that? That's also something. Can we just collectively get just pay our respects to Rallycross real quick when it got changed in Hot Shots? Feels bad, man. Such a fucking cool discipline, and got ruined on Hot Shots. Feels eight, man. It was actually really fun to play.
So I have a little tinfoil hat theory.
Go on.
Run it.
So like, what was it when the guys that were cared about the game? I think all of them just there was just like a huge mass exodus during the after Hobbies came out, because I think that was someone's love child. Like that was supposed to be in the game, but like it just got pushed back so far because they want to keep on pushing out new updates. Like the biggest updates that everyone probably worked on were probably the hovercraft and demo.
Yeah,
then after that,
those were like the main, still the core updates that were like part of the game's original vision, I feel like.
And I think Hobbies was actually supposed to be a core part of the game also, but they just pushed it back so far, and it's only been like one person working on it. And I feel like that happened a lot. It's just one person working on one thing, like just by themselves, and it just kept getting pushed back because it's only one person working on it.
That sort of thing, like you are actually so right, because like it would benefit a lot from being out earlier, from being more fleshed out, from more than one person working on it.
Yeah,
like actually it's not that much of a tinfoil hat theory.
Yeah, it really isn't.
So after all that stuff got pushed out, and then we started getting all this I think it was like during the Motorfest era. Like when that came in, I think they just went to full monetization mode and just said, "Fuck it, everyone go to the next game. You guys work on this."
Yeah.
The few people that actually did care about TC2, but the people that actually did care are just people that don't have enough experience to fully utilize all the tools that they have to make the game good.
Also, you just don't have enough resource at this point.
Yeah.
Even if you do have a good idea, not enough time. You gotta put out 4 months of content every time, somehow.
I think the main issue is just not enough experience in the small team that we have still working on the game while everyone else jumps ship and is working on the next game. And even the people that are working on the next game probably don't
really have the experience. Plus, they're like the newer guys from TC2, which didn't really have the sort of understanding or care that was put into TC2 and TC1, I feel like.
Yeah. And the people that really did care about the crew just aren't there anymore. They went off to go do a different game.
Yeah. Like the handling dev.
My bet, Solar Crown. Or they went to a different studio that does other racing games.
Maybe.
Maybe even
or maybe not even
3.
racing games. Yeah, maybe not even racing games. Maybe just different games altogether. If they're just like physicians, or like computer engineers or something. They could have even gotten different jobs in a different branch.
What's the most recent game that came out that's been like actually pretty nice on handling? Like I feel like Grid's always had decent handling. I've never been really into it.
Same, I feel like the handling was cool, but I've never really into it. I think Project Cars 3 honestly had nice handling, but it didn't. I felt like the steering was kind of delayed. It didn't really feel direct to me.
It
never.
I like the way it felt and everything. I like the way that the tires gripped up. I love that feeling. For whatever reason, they got the tire model just on point. I love the way the tires interact with the road. The weighty feeling is a little funny for me because like you have to kind of take corners weirdly, especially when there's like a left right, especially on California Highway, because I
the left right ones. Because I feel like there's a pause, like even Hiron like mentioned it. There's like pause of your driver from transitioning from left to right in the steering. Like the driver temporarily pauses and then turns again. And for me, that like creates like a very vagueness, like indirect feeling all of a sudden. You sort of like have to like it's almost as if it has its own steering curve that you have to get used to. And I feel like that was very annoying to get used to. But like other than that, the steering model itself is probably like the other game that I consider to be nice at least.
It was a good foundation in my opinion,
Yeah.
but it lacked actual game element being built around it. Like they
But like I
they
did
just sort of
enjoy.
dropped it into like a shell of Project Cars 2. It feels
Yeah,
like that
I feel
whole
like
new
I
gameplay
did
system,
enjoy the
and
game though.
never tied it together.
Also, I'm not sure about the whole upgrades. Like, sure, they were linear, but I feel like they were still too much. In some aspect, like they were still too OP. Some cars just didn't work, others didn't work out very well.
Power build everything.
Yeah,
and
like
just make
power
it
build
handle
everything.
later.
Exactly. Like wasn't really quite into that. And also, like I did enjoy the game with like the few things, which was mainly like playing the French Riviera track, I think, and the California Highway with Kyle, Hiron, and Co. Other than that, but yeah, that was also mainly just playing stock cars and shit.
I left some of the smaller Dubai configurations on like shitbox tier cars, because for the first few days people didn't even figure out the build so well that they couldn't keep up with me just drifting on that fucking Lancer. It was so hilarious.
But yeah, I feel like Project Cars 3 probably did it alright. Other than that, honestly, Forza Horizon, just like shit on the game all you want. It does the physics right.
Yeah.
It
And
does.
it's the place to be in terms of community content as well.
Yeah, it is the place to be from a handling point of view. Like it's the best benchmark we've got at the moment. Like the way they limit the steering and their steering angle limitation and their overall grip balance of cars is tuned just right. And then I feel like that's from decades and decades of experience on Forza, previous Forza titles. And like once they found a formula that works well, they just never changed it since Forza 4. They just never changed it, and that's exactly what you should do. When you have a good physics model, like you shouldn't change it. You should change all the other aspects, but don't change the physics model.
Yeah.
I want to go into a little bit of community content. Like I know you guys harped on, we need track create all this, track create that. What about the more artistic side, especially for Forza? Like you can't have, there is censorship, but I feel like they're putting censorship
It's
in the wrong place.
pure L. It's literally L. It's just living L on the Forza side. Like that is just ridiculous. Like they're just being straight up like Nazi tier. Honestly,
Yeah,
like
but
what the fuck,
Trying
dude?
to make a game like that PG-3 is just a pointless attempt.
Yeah.
Like
But-
just accept PG-12 so that people can like at least be free.
Yeah, and like they're acting as if like 6 years olds aren't gonna buy the game. They are still gonna buy the game.
But then the Crew 2 has like literally no censorship about in any liveries you create. I'm pretty sure. Like I've never
It's
heard of
a
anyone get banned.
robuster report system. Other than that,
Yeah.
I think having complete freedom is fine.
Yeah, honestly, I don't see an issue with it. Like, even if people make like weird statements, political statements, I couldn't care less. Like, honestly
Like
couldn't care less.
those you can report those liveries. Like if they do something with the
Yeah.
reports, that's a different thing. But
I see a lot of fucking what's it called, like Nazi stuff. That's a given in any game where you can make
or
something.
Pornhub liveries,
Yeah.
shit like that.
It still
That's gonna
I
happens
happen.
mean, the
Forza,
Pornhub liveries I feel are completely innocent as long as
Yeah.
it's just the Pornhub logo, right?
Yeah.
Brand logos are just just the brand logos. I think that's completely fine. Like you can have an OnlyFans livery, awesome, good for you. Now if you start putting
Yeah.
feet pics on the side, that's where I have an issue.
What is wrong with feet, dude? It's just feet.
Okay.
Yeah,
ar-
feet
ar-
Does it
fetish,
distract
that's
you
all.
so
All
much? Is that the problem? Or
all right, no. Okay, armpit pics. If you put armpit pics up, on the
brother,
side.
what's wrong with armpits?
okay.
Oh my god.
Just say what you want. Say boob pics.
If you put PP pics up on your
There you go.
up on the side of your car, that's when I get distracted, and I just don't want that shit.
Then you can just report that, no, that it won't show up in your game.
No,
right?
I needs to be removed completely from. No, it's fine.
Yeah, like I
Yeah.
feel freedom in that regard is fine, especially because
Yeah.
TC2 is PG-12, I think. So
Yeah. Honestly, like other than that, like Forza's censorship is horrible. The way they do content is pretty horrendous. Like, I don't really feel like
the censorship is strangely woke too. Like
Yeah.
people like
Yeah.
they for whatever reason they listen to the Twitter mob. Oh, this is
It's
Some dude
inevitable
got his
'cause
livery
they,
removed because it had the name Brandon on it.
really.
Yeah, that's something that I mean I don't know if it's a trustworthy source, but that's what I saw on Reddit. So
That's hilariously stupid.
They are like obeying the Microsoft filter sort of stuff, and sometimes it gets updated with like the most random shit ever, like the ban of the word swap in the tune description.
what?
What?
That,
Really?
yeah, that is.
like that sort of shit is just ridiculous. Like
I think it's
Well,
like the
this
same
is
with
why
the-
you stick to sort of your own stuff and don't,
Yeah.
you know.
no, like I feel like with Forza, like the only good thing about Forza to take away is handling and like community creation tools like handling creator. That's it. Like that's
Yeah,
the main thing.
but
Those are the two
Those
things.
tools, like the power in just the tools alone.
Exactly, because like those two are the main things about the racing game that make that racing game good, and that's those two tools are literally the ones that are carrying the game essentially.
Like they literally made a Gran Turismo inside Forza and Forza Motorsport inside Horizon.
Exactly,
Like they have
like-
that academy with like the license tests and stuff.
Yeah, I
GeForce
know.
knows.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah, I know that.
that's like an entire game inside the game,
Yeah.
and then you have like emulating GT hoppers from Motorsport in the 1 Hour League server with like balance of performance cars, which people really put in effort to test and make sure that they are balanced. 1 hour races like endurance, like that's a completely different game from the standard Forza experience as well.
Yeah, like
And then
that-
you have like
it's
street wars and
community.
team wars, like
Yeah, it's community
the old
experience,
Horizon
basically.
player.
Yeah, like
Like,
it's
there's
the,
just
it's
so
the,
much.
It's the community that community created content essentially. like,
I'm
in
so
a
jealous
nutshell.
that Forza has it and TC2 has none of it.
Yeah, I mean, like that's the issue. Like, just like, that's the thing. Like, just those community created tools and like the handling of single handedly carrying the game, and that's it. And but then they go to show just how important it is to have good handling and community created tools in your game.
At
If you
least
just
they have
these
that
two-
base that
Yeah.
like you didn't do that much yourself to to keep the players there, okay? But at least you have the base for them to still entertain themselves.
Exactly, and
I
that's
think
the main
an
thing.
even more interesting aspect about this is TC1 had a track creator,
But it was
very
limited, though.
basic one, but it's more than what TC2 has.
I'm pretty sure people still share codes for the track creator for TC1, don't they?
Yeah,
I don't know.
sometimes. Every
like-
once in a while, I see the chat lit up.
But like, why is like even if it is stupidly basic like that, why doesn't TC2 have that?
Yeah, that is weird. Why don't they have that? Like, why do you downgrade features like that for in TC2? I just don't understand.
For example, in the channel sharing those codes for TC1, just at the end of the previous month, somebody posted a race inspired by Need for Speed Run, Coast to Coast. Like it's people
That's
still
pretty
do
based.
stuff on it because that creator at least exists.
Yeah, it's such a shame, honestly. And I feel like if TC2 had community created content, plus they had kept the launch day handling to this day, we would still be playing it. A lot of us would still be playing it. We wouldn't even be on Forza or other games. I would probably still be playing it.
I saw people recreating even tracks from TC2 in TC1 with that thing.
Yeah, I think
That's
somebody remember. I think I saw
extremely
somebody create
interesting
New
stuff.
York or some shit like that. It was kind of funny. But yeah,
I
stuff
would
like that.
I would probably create new rally raid tracks that are practically solo.
Rather than create like only solo rally raid tracks to 10,000 billion trees.
Yeah. It's gonna be weird
Weaving
too.
up and down the mountain.
I would remake Yellowstone too, and that forced you to make that weird jump.
Yeah, there's the community creation content would be endless. Plus, if they had still had the OG handling, it would have been the game would have been honestly, for us at least, would have been like Forza Horizon levels of popularity, even not more, if not more. Of course, the fucking what do you call it, the average mob on Forza was like more realism and would shit on the handling and talk shit about it, but it wouldn't matter.
Yeah, it wouldn't matter because we
Exactly.
could still like I don't even see like that point of comparing to Forza, like it does pop up every once in a while, but it really is like once in a while. Like
Yeah,
people in the TC2 community really don't give a fuck about it. And
exactly.
then like if you would have that creator in TC2 and actually fleshed out, it has like so much more power with all the custom props
Yeah,
TC2 added over its lifespan. It's crazy potential.
yeah.
Well, unfortunately, never going to happen.
Yeah, like I remember even back when people used to shit on like TC2's handling when run on launch day, like none of us gave a shit. He was like, okay, cope, Nick, cope, just keep coping.
Oh.
I wonder how like compatible the stuff would be between TC1 and TC2, because I think like people dream about like the 5M type of stuff in TC1, but for me, I think TC2 has like so much more potential for it. I think it would be maybe cool to drag around some stuff from TC1 if it would be compatible to TC2, but what if not? Then a project a
I
type
mean,
of
it would
5M would be
probably
so much more valuable on TC2.
be similar now because like TC2 would probably like I mean they're similar systems. It would just be like probably TC2's engine probably has more updates, more engine updates.
You
But
just
other
have
than
so much
that,
more freedom on the map and like
yeah,
the vehicle types, the props, and all that stuff. I don't know
yeah,
how
that
much of that you
probably.
could compensate for in TC1, even if you do have full of
I mean,
authority. I don't know.
if you wanna make your like if you wanna make your racing game only like only vehicle like car based racing game, TC1 probably would be fine as a 5M. But if you want to make anything more than that, then I would probably use TC2 as a base, like for
TC2
the
has
collision
more
lanes
of
and
that
stuff.
potential of people making several more different games inside the game, if you
Yeah,
know what I mean. Like there's just much more.
yeah.
I
I
would be
mean,
interested to see like the fucking Gran Turismo or Forza type of stuff recreated here, and then your suggestion with like the dogfights and bringing that potentially,
yeah, the
allegedly cut
paintball
content,
mode.
yeah, of
Yeah,
that. Like there's just so many games which you create inside which you can create
yeah,
inside this game.
We can actually use some of the real life circuits in the game. They're just there,
yeah. I
just sitting
imagine.
there.
Yeah,
Lagoon's
yeah.
sake, oh no.
That would be the clone of the Forza Motorsport using all those circuits.
I mean, they removed what's his face? The one in Miami,
Wait,
Sebring.
they just straight removed the circuit from the map?
Yeah, Sebring is no longer there.
Oh.
It's the custom Miami racetrack now.
Oh, okay.
There used to be Sebring in TC1.
I think that's sort of better, because they're not going to create a faithful track.
For middle of
No,
nowhere.
yeah, like I agree with just like removing them and adding more custom tracks on like spots that are empty. Like
But yeah,
that's what they did with the Forsberg stuff. Like just make a custom racetrack. Like yeah, that's fantastic.
Yeah,
Or
I'm
Especially with like the
extremely curious
multiple
about how they
routes and
pulled
shit.
that off, like the complete custom areas, like just out of nowhere.
I mean, they
Like if
literally have
that
dev
could be
tools.
added to the creator, imagine
Yeah.
the potential.
They just have
Bro,
dev tools for that.
the Forsberg stuff ruined Roswell.
Oh no.
Like
Boo-hoo.
at the beginning now, you make a left and it just goes around the track. That's it.
That's funny as shit.
They built like it's like a canyon type thing. Like there's rocks along the side. It's basically just a dirt track with canyon walls, and like they just put some elevation there, like stepped elevation and a couple of ramps and shit, like some rock piles here and there, just to make it so you're not just driving like around a circle.
Yeah, it would be interesting to see like what could be done. Also, like the kind of you could even make circuits outside of the racetracks. Just utilizing
In
like
the
the country roads
sky.
in the sky, or like just utilizing country roads. Pre-existing roads, like making turning them into laps. You could probably have some pretty interesting stuff going on.
Yeah.
Well, I feel like we've talked about just about everything we needed to.
Yeah, pretty much. There's not much else we can talk about. We've pretty much covered all all of our rants, all of our points.
Okay. You guys want to do a Q&A?
Sure.
I mean, what's there to aim?
If
Which
there's
views?
anyone up for it.
Does anyone have any questions? Chat? No? Maybe? Oh, Gron's here.
Oh no.
Hello?
We're still doing a podcast.
You missed roasting the entirety of TC2 for 3 hours straight.
Yeah.
Let's go.
It's already over, bro.
It's fine. I mean, I didn't really care enough to.
Oh,
my
we're still alive. This
thoughts.
guy.
Oh, I mean, I totally cared about the well-being of the game. I
Don't
wish
wor-
every racing game
don't
would
worry.
be.
Gron
Oh
loves you
my
guys.
God,
He
this
loves
guy.
everyone.
We're the fun-loving community. Yes, we care so much about everyone and everything. Yes,
Yeah, you
yes.
care about all the PS4 heads that still play the game?
You mean the irrelevant people?
Do you care about the people that missed the game on Stadia?
Were there even people?
Oh my god.
The solid 24 people that enjoyed the game on Stadia.
I felt like it was more like the 24 people that even had Stadia. Like, what?
All right,
I
then.
don't know.
A crazy fact for you, even the relevant previous summit, like not a car summit, not nothing, on PlayStation platforms, 126k was registered on the summit.
126.
That's crazy for a 5-year-old game.
Yeah.
126 people just opened up the game and played one event at least.
26,000, dude.
Yep.
Jesus Christ.
Even
wonder they
Xbox
listen to
was
PS,
almost
yeah.
17k.
No wonder they still listen to PS4 heads, because that's the
Yeah.
That's their money, dude. That
Yeah.
is their entire money. Like 90% of the game is PlayStation.
Like all that
Unfortunately,
we
they're
said
also-
here is so irrelevant compared to those
Yeah.
126k now.
Exactly. they're just gonna like look at the numbers and they're gonna be like, these guys don't know anything. Fuck them.
These guys don't know about the black bars.
Yeah.
The side of
That's the thing. Like the entire feedback, unfortunately, even though they're gonna take it from them, is based on people who do free mode Hellcat drag race on the airport.
Bro, what are they adding the Charger Hellcat, bro?
Oh,
my God,
Red Eye,
bro.
bro.
Bro, my Charger
don't
Hellcat Red Eye, you ain't gonna keep up in a straight line with it.
What do you mean, Charger Hellcat? We have Hellcat at home. What is
Oh,
it called
no.
again?
Lab Edition.
Lab Edition.
Dies
Oh
of
my
cringe.
god. Yeah, like
Well, anyways,
That's-
before this goes on any longer,
Yeah,
we're done
time to
here.
wrap up.
yeah.
I think the stream can be wrapped up. I think we touched upon a nice amount of subjects, and
So-
yeah, what can you say? The game is dead, and
Yeah, game
It's-
is
I
dead.
mean,
It's dead,
not on
like-
PlayStation. It's dead to us.
yeah, but it
if
shall
it's
live
dead
on.
to me, it is dead completely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The only people that matter are yourselves. There you go.
Kind of easy.
Yeah,
Episode 4, I don't know when. Another year. 3 years, I don't know.
when TCM comes out.
Yeah, when TCM
What do you
comes
mean? I
out.
thought
Maybe
we were playing that. What?
You have to.
Yeah. No, we're just gonna sit here and spout inaccurate statements about TCM without having played the game. I think that's about
course.
par for the course in the industry, right?
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Bro, TC3?
For TC3?
Bro, TC3.
From
Oh,
here for
inaccurate
TC4.
statements, bro. The inner drive handling so much better than the OG
Oh
handling.
my
Oh
God.
my god, it's so
You
good.
Black Panther.
Oh,
So good.
it's
Lit.
better, bro. Even though I totally don't even know what the original was like, bro. It's better. I
Bro, the
promise.
Crew 2 aged like fine wine.
The Crew is my favorite racing game series. I haven't played it in 2 years.
Holy shit.
Yep. And
Anyways.
that's the words of the former best PvP player of the game.
The former clown.
What do you mean, former?
Oh.
I would like to
Oh.
title of clown.
Bro, Install, come at me.
1v1 me?
Oh, damn. Okay, right. This is the end of the podcast.
Yeah, this is the
Thank
end
you
of the
for
podcast.
listening.
before it
Goodbye.
deteriorates